Full bench. I am calling to order this meeting of the Common Council Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, March 27th, 2019. And we have one item on the agenda. Do we call roll? Call roll. Okay. We have one item on the agenda, and I am chairing this meeting in place of Councilmember Granger at her request tonight, case of bronchitis. And I also want to just announce real quick that there are child care professionals down in the Kelly Room 135 that the Chamber of Commerce has kindly arranged for this evening if anybody wants to take advantage of that. We have one item on the agenda, Resolution 1906, approving issuance of tax increment revenue bonds for the City of Bloomington Redevelopment District to finance the cost of acquisition and construction of the 4th Street parking garage in the Bloomington Consolidated Economic Development Area and costs incurred in connection with the issuance of such bonds. I need to confer just one moment with my parliamentarian.
Let's go ahead and start the regular presentation.
All right, so let's get started. I think Mr. Adam Wason is here to present this resolution.
Great. Good evening, members of council. Always an honor to be in front of you. As you know, we're here tonight to revisit the parking facility bond request for the 4th Street garage. I'll just go through a real brief synopsis of where we've been and how we've gotten to where we're at. As you know, the Redevelopment Commission did approve a resolution authorizing the issuance of a bond for demolition and construction of a parking facility located at 4th Street. The maximum amount for that would be $18.54 million for a repayment period not to exceed 20 years or a per annum rate of 6%. The repayment of the bond will come from a combination of the net revenues of overall garage operations and the tax increment revenues. Overall, one of the main things we've been talking about when we talk about this garage and the Trades District garage is the bond issuance and the cost savings of doing those two bond issuances together in a combined fashion. By doing so in the combined fashion, we estimate savings of over $1 million total dollars instead of doing those separately. You can see the breakdown there at the bottom of that slide with site management, mobilization, demobilization, general economies of scale, and then just the bond issuance costs as well, those fixed costs and the savings we could see there. Here, just another summary of activity to date. I won't go through all of these. We've been looking into this for many, many months, and in my case, probably over a year, with all of the different parking studies we've done on this. And to highlight some of the most recent things, we were in front of the council in December, and on the 19th of December, council recommended a repair of the instead of replacement for the 4th Street garage. Soon after that, we initiated an updated structural engineer's report on the condition of the 4th Street garage utilizing CE Solutions. It's a group that had had done and completed a structural engineer's report for us back in March of 2018. We did get that updated report on February 15th of 2019. That report's been shared pretty widely, but that report highlighted urgent, high, medium, and low priority repairs. The high and urgent repairs were those needed to be done to give the life of the garage an estimated 5-year expansion of its current lifespan. Some summaries, some just highlighted points of those structural engineers' reports. We had the May 2018 report with engineers' estimates for repairs at $1.1 million. The updated February 19 report listed costs at the $1.4 million mark. And that $1.4 million does not include additional costs, soft costs such as construction management, engineering inspection services, any change orders or contingencies for unknowns. Our main concern at this point is, with the current parking facilities fund balance of only at $1.5 million, and the other with the amount of the amount for the current estimates on repairs, as well as the other capital costs that we have needs for at our other facilities, we're glad the council's revisiting this request. Just to click through to the next slide, just make quick mention, we are and have been for some time, and I give a lot of credit to Ryan Daly, our parking garage manager. We've been making sure we don't get in this position with our other garages. This position where preventative maintenance isn't completed on a regular basis, and got a slide here, and we can provide this some more information on this as well, but there are ongoing capital cost needs at the other garages. There are going to be ongoing capital cost needs in addition to the $1.4+ million of repairs at the 4th Street garage on an annual basis, and that's just part of the operations of the garages to make sure that they are maintained, to make sure that they are going to actually achieve the lifespan that they're originally intended for. I'm going to make brief mention and then turn it over to Alex Crowley. We haven't changed anything in terms of our previous agreements with this garage as far as solar panels, as far as bike parking, as far as restrooms, some ground floor retail. One thing to note, the Park Smart certification that we would be going at after for these garages, Trades District included, we would be the first garages in the state of Indiana to achieve that certification. That is basically, I know folks are pretty familiar with LEED for buildings. Park Smart is LEED for parking garages. And, we want to do things the right way. We recognize the environmental sensitivities of the current conditions of the climate and all of that. We also recognize the need for parking in the downtown. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex Crowley, and then we'll be here to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Wason. Mr. Crowley.
Good evening, council members. I'm Alex Crowley. I'm Director of Economic Sustainable Development. First, thank you for reconsidering the question of the 4th Street garage. We appreciate your openness to support this critical community infrastructure asset, especially in light of the clearer view of costs associated with a short-term fix of the existing structure. The Department of Economic and Sustainable Development is uniquely positioned to reflect the spectrum of views you'll likely hear this evening during public comment. We represent the Venn diagram of Bloomington's important economic vitality, the community's and administration's strong commitment to sustainability, and our city's vibrant arts and culture organizations. Our department doesn't struggle to align these. We embrace the fact that these three aspects of life in this great city are mutually supportive. Together, they are what we broadly refer to as Bloomington's quality of life. As you know, vibrant downtown businesses support the arts attract investment, and our investments themselves. Investments allow us to build out and take advantage of multimodal infrastructure and renewable energy assets. Those assets improve the quality of our environment, which in turn makes Bloomington an attractive place to grow business. These elements comprising Bloomington's quality of life are deeply intertwined and mutually supportive. Part of our role in local government is to help maintain and develop the infrastructure and core services that support this quality of life for all residents. It includes, among other things, our streets, our public safety, our sanitation services, our drinking water, our public transportation system, our business incubators, and in this case, our parking infrastructure. While the 4th Street garage is, on the one hand, fundamentally a place to park cars and bikes, it's also something that represents an important way we can efficiently support our quality of life. It stimulates tourism, which, as you can see here, brings critical outside money to fuel our downtown economy. The garage sits in the Bloomington Entertainment and Arts District, the BEAD, and allows people to take advantage of the myriad arts and cultural events in our remarkable local organizations, that our organizations provide each month. It gives employees of and visitors to our growing downtown employer base a destination point for their commutes, and many of these employees choose to live out of town. And the garage represents the most efficient and sustainable way to handle the car traffic that comes from all of this activity. Adam enumerated the sustainability features included in our proposal. We strongly support these, including the solar panels, the electric car facilities, and the bike parking capacity. We have to react to climate change and do our part to reverse the very visible aspects we're already seeing, which is in part while we're actively pursuing our commitment to transportation demand management, having received just this past Monday the responses to our request for proposal. Transportation demand management, or TDM, is often misunderstood. It's fundamentally a way to make single occupancy vehicle traffic alternatives as attractive or more attractive to individuals and organizations by providing incentives to stimulate the use of public and multimodal transportation assets. We recognize we have a lot of work to do on this front and are pleased to be continuing our commitment to sustainability by engaging in this important effort. In sum, we appreciate your understanding of the role this garage plays in consolidating vehicles into an efficient and centralized structure such that our downtown can continue to thrive. We appreciate your recognition of the importance of economic vitality, arts and cultural programming, and sustainability, and the role that they all have in our quality of life. And we recognize that this is a difficult and important reconsideration on your part and appreciate that you're willing to take it on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Does that conclude the administration's?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, it does.
Now we will go to questions from council members. Do I see any questions? Councilmember Chopra.
Yes, I have two questions off the bat, and I was hoping the administration can answer this question. Why are we here again?
Previous decision after, my understanding is because the council decided to revisit this decision after getting the updated engineer's estimates on repairs.
Okay, could you go into a little more detail about those estimates and the updates and so on? What they were, what they are now?
Yeah, I mentioned that in my part of the presentation. The March 2018 report showed that the repairs would cost $1.1 million for the 5-year repairs. The updated engineer's report from February of 2019 listed costs in the $1.4 million range. The vast majority of the cost increases are due to advanced deterioration of the facility from the March time period, or the May time period to February. This was deterioration that was well above and beyond what was expected of the engineers. Their second visits to the site to update the report showed deterioration that they did not expect to see so quickly. In talking with Carrie Walden, our representative of CE Solutions, she said it was shocking the amount of deterioration that had occurred in that, roughly 9 to 10 month time frame. So, those costs are higher. There's several of the formerly medium priority repairs, moved up to the high priority in that short amount of time frame. The water infiltration in the concrete, the steel beams that are rusting, there are structural issues that are serious enough that another $300,000 of cost was added just in that short amount of time.
And my second question is, I know that there were estimates for other options. I was hoping to see some sort of, chart or graph to just easily see those numbers all at once. And I understand I didn't tell you that I was expecting that, but just in my head, I was trying to put that together just for ease of understanding the different options. Perhaps you could tell me, and then I could make my own little.
Yeah, so both of the reports have been on the city website for some time. I believe they were provided to the council.
I understand it's, there's people of the public here and those
Sure.
at home.
No,
I think it might be informative. Thank you.
My point being that the, both reports in their entirety are on the city's parking facilities website.
Okay.
And are publicly viewable. So from the May 25th, 2018 report to the February 2019 report, again, the repairs were listed in categories of urgent. We took care of the urgent repairs as soon as last year in 2018. Those were repairs that were urgent enough that if we didn't undertake them quickly, the garage would have closed at that time. The high priority repairs in the May 2018 report were the repairs that would need to be made for the 5-year time frame to expand the time frame of the garage's lifespan by 5 years. By doing the urgent, high, and medium repairs, that would have gotten the 10-year time frame. By doing the urgent, high, medium, and low priority repairs from the May 2018 report, that would have been the 15-year time frame. Based on the council decision in December of 2018 to recommend repair for the 5-year time frame, we asked our structural engineers to reevaluate for the 5-year time frame. So we don't have updated numbers on 10 and 15 years at this time. We tried to save some dollars on those studies by just asking them to do the 5-year period.
Okay. Could you just tell us again what the, you said 10 and 15-year numbers were?
I can, and just recognize these are from the May report, not the most recent, so we don't have the most recent updated numbers for that because we only asked our structural team to update the 5-year costs. And that's
Okay.
where some of those previously medium priorities moved up into the high priority. But I'm pulling that up right now. Again, the May 2015 estimates for 5 years was 1.1.
2018.
I'm sorry. May 15th of 2018. I keep getting that messed up. So the 5-year repairs were the 1.118 million. And for the high and medium priority subtotal, that was 2.17. And for the urgent, high, medium, and low priorities, it was 3.085. Again, that's not updated in the February report, only the 5-year one is.
So, I apologize, but I remember discussing, if we repair, for a 5-year repair to make it functional for 5 years, it was the 1.1 million. For a 10 years function, it was this total amount. So what was that amount that would need to be spent to make it functional for 10 years?
Alex has shown me another spreadsheet where we actually did the indices with for construction cost index. That was, again, the 5-year with that included was the 1.5 million, the 10-year was 2.5, and the 15 was 3.5. That does include, the accelerators based on CPI and things like that.
May I just jump in because I want to clarify? I think the question is, the 10-year repair at 2.17 million, is that in addition to what you pay for the 5-year repair, or is that the total?
Total.
Total, okay,
Yes.
thank you. Are you?
But that does, let me clarify too, that is the total if all of the repairs are undertaken on day one. So it wouldn't be that you would do the 5-year repairs and then in 5 years come back.
Right.
Those would all need to be done at the same time. Sorry, misunderstood that question.
Thank you.
Councilmember Volin.
Yes, I'd like to clarify just at the beginning here, who sponsored this ordinance? Which member of council sponsored this ordinance?
It's a resolution.
Resolution. So how did it get on our agenda?
Oh, thank you.
It was council leadership,
Okay.
myself included.
And Mr. Sherman, just to be clear, it wasn't resolved by introducing it this evening. This is a committee of the whole. It was resolved by this counts as first reading for a resolution, doesn't it? Well, that's something we need to clarify, I think. Okay, specifically, first of all, I need to ask for a clarification. Is it 1.4 million or 1.5 million?
Well, what we were talking about earlier, that, that's got the construction cost, what were you?
It's one or the other.
Well, and Councilmember, these are engineers' estimates. So the engineer's estimate is $1.4 million at this time. Again, that does not include any of the soft costs, which would include construction management, engineering, inspection services, any change orders or things like that. So we'll stick with 1.4 as the engineer's estimate from their report. The other fiscal analysis that we presented back in December included other things such as the CPI being included over time and things like that. So
I mean, can you see why I might be disheartened by knowing that, well, how many times are you going to come back and ask for more money, no matter what the choice is to repair or to replace? I have questions that I'll ask later about a new garage. How much is the estimate for the new garage now versus 6 months ago? But I have other questions I'm going to wait and ask them after other people have had a chance. Thank you.
Councilmember Rallo.
Mr. Wason, because of the deterioration you mentioned in a meeting between council and the administration some weeks ago, that the garage would require inspection on a regular basis, monthly or quarterly,
yeah, absolutely.
and this is an additional cost.
Yeah, right now, CE Solutions is under contract with us, and to do the initial structural engineering investigations for all 3 garages, that was a $260,000 contract. We did an addended contract with them to include this additional scope. Moving forward, we would need, and CE's been in town regularly since that May timeframe, continuing to do inspections and such, and that would definitely need to continue throughout any expansion of the life of this garage.
And it was my understanding that if new deterioration arose during those inspections, it might result in the closure of the garage again.
Absolutely. Any time that we would identify any life safety issues like we had, recently and close the garage, absolutely. As soon as those would be identified, we would be closing that garage again.
I have one other question, may I
Yes,
ask?
go ahead.
It's a simple question, and that is, an impasse that we reached last December was the height of the garage,
Sure.
which was indeterminate at that time. And we have come a long way to resolve that. Could we describe what the height maximum would likely be and the height minimum?
I'm going to defer to Deputy Mayor Mick Reneisen on that one.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members. Mick Reneisen, Deputy Mayor. According to our project engineer, the estimate for this is an estimate of height, so it's not an absolute because we haven't designed the structure yet. It takes into account a couple of variables. The first variable is that, as we all learned, and Councilmember Volan was part of our interview team for the architect and the construction manager as a constructor for the parking facility at the Trades District, we've learned that convertibility, if not intentional in 10 to 12 years, is a waste of money. And I'm paraphrasing our collective 10-person, others of them are in the audience's understanding of this after we went through the process of interviewing folks for that project. As a result, and in discussions with the council at an internal work session, we have been able to reduce the height of the structure potentially by only having the ground floor as the convertible floor, retail 15-foot high ceiling, and the rest be at a different height. We would still explore convertibility in different ways. You can have flat plates on one side, not the other. They may add height to the structure, which we know is a sensitivity to the community. So having said those two caveats, the potential height is now bound by another variable, and that's the square footprint that we have. If we can build on the existing 4th Street footprint at less than 550 spaces, which is what the resolution suggests and the RDC approved, and we use that new dynamic design of ground floor at 15 feet and the rest at normal height, the rest of the floors at normal height, on the existing footprint, we could get 527 spaces on a 78-foot plus or minus structure. Okay, that's the estimate from the project manager. If we were able to widen the footprint, that obviously requires property acquisition that we can't say at this time whether it would happen or not. We're certainly not going to explore that until the council makes its determination moving forward. That can be spread out over a different distance, and the height could be 68 feet and 544 spaces. So 527 on the existing footprint, plus or minus 78 feet. 527 spaces, 544 on a bigger footprint, 68 feet would be the plus or minus there. And that takes that convertibility as more of an option, except on the main floor we would do convertibility. Does that answer your question?
68 feet to 78 feet,
Yes,
more or less bounded.
that is correct.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any other council questions? First round, Councilmember Sturbaum.
How many spaces do you increase when you drop a floor on that smaller footprint?
So we haven't designed this, so I can't say with certainty. I think you can kind of guess from the number of floors that we would have that it'd probably be between 70 and 80 spaces of floor on the smaller footprint.
So is that 6 floors, or what is it?
Right, so 15 and 60, yes. On the existing footprint, we'd be talking 6 floors over. Remember that first level, and I know the council is aware of this, slopes from 4th Street to 3rd Street. So at grade at 4th Street and below grade, you get a little bit more exposure of the building facade on the 3rd Street side. So it would be 6 floors over the top of that ground floor.
7 floors, 15
7
foot and then
counting
6 floors?
The 3rd Street elevation would look like 7 floors, correct? It's about
Okay.
the height of the Hyatt. That's even higher because the Hyatt has an element that sticks up above its elevator structures that makes it stand out higher than its 7-story profile.
Right, so we're about 70 a floor, is that right?
I think that's right. As an estimate, I think that's right.
Has anyone considered building in such a way that that last floor could be built after the fact?
Again, we
Can it be
haven't designed
pre-built,
anything.
structured?
We haven't designed anything. I think that's certainly something we could entertain.
Okay, thank you.
Any other first round questions? Yes, Councilmember Ruff.
Really interested in the longer distance commuting patterns. Mr. Crowley, that slide you had up earlier, all the counties were to the west, and I'm counting, even though I know Marion County is actually east of us, the corridor that people travel actually comes down on the west side of town. So I'm going to consider all that to the west. Why is Jackson, Brown not included? Do we just have such low numbers of commuters from the east?
Well, you'll see that Brown County is listed on the bottom there. These are the top counties that send us commuters. Brown County had
I can't read that
529.
without my glasses.
Brown County had 529, Johnson County had 428. So I just listed really the top ones. I mean, there are people coming from all over the state, but these are the
So is Martin County comparable probably to Brown or Bartholomew, do you know?
I would have to go back and look at the data, but probably.
Okay, I'm just thinking about the geography of the most efficient placement of intense development relative to the people who are least likely in the lacking the state reinstituting light rail or something, who are going to be forced to drive the most. Okay, thanks. That's all I want to know.
Any other first round questions? Okay, if not, I will ask one. I have so many. Last Friday at our council work session, the city controller, Jeff Underwood, told us that we would soon be seeing an appropriation ordinance for $1,650,000 in reversions. That was money budgeted in 2018 that was not spent. This would be enough to repair this garage. Am I correct? Is there any reason why we can't just use that money to repair the garage? It's reversions, therefore, nobody is counting on that to fund their 2019 programming. Comment? Question?
It is technically valid that that amount could cover the repair. From the administration's perspective, I would counter with 2 thoughts. It doesn't change the garage's condition. The garage needs to be repaired to an extensive level that you're now aware of, and it still only supplies us 5 years of lifespan by any estimate that we can get from our engineer, which means we'd have to come back and tear it down in 5 years. So the administration came to you in December, and at a 1.1 million estimate, thought that was a bad idea then. At 1.4, we think it's an even worse idea. So we would not recommend, from the administration's hat, using that source of funds on a structure that would have to be replaced in 5 years. So while it's technically true, you're right that that amount could cover that, that's not how we would choose to spend the reversions. And in fact, you know, the department heads saved a lot of money, and I think they should be credited for that. And they do have needs that arise that can't be budgeted for in cycles that the council budget process sets aside, right? We meet with you in August the previous year. Needs change, needs arise. I think the department head should be applauded for saving that money. You, of course, could appropriate it for other uses, but they have thoughts on how they'd like to best appropriate it for the best use of the residents that they all serve in their departments. So that would be my comment.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Underwood, I see you are here. Could you just speak briefly to, is there anything fiscally, legally preventing us from using the reversions to repair the 4th Street garage?
That's a yes and no question. The combination of reversions may come from multiple funds, and some of those funds are not eligible to fund repairs to the garage. Anything that was in the general fund would be eligible, the parking meter fund or parking facilities. Beyond that, there would not be funds that we could use, reversions of other funds, so like risk management, fleet maintenance, parks and recreation. Those funds are not eligible to fund those type of expenditures.
In preparation for our vote next week, could you please provide me with the amount of reversions that could be used for this purpose?
I
And
believe
where
that
they would
it
come
will-
from?
Yes, I
departments.
believe that's been provided to the council's office, and it will be in your packet that goes out this Friday.
Okay, but see, I won't necessarily recognize which funds we can and cannot use, so if you
I
could
can
specify
indicate
that.
those two. Really, 3 funds are the general fund, the rainy day fund, which has no reversions, parking facilities, and parking meter. Those are the 4 funds that could fund repair of the garage. No other funds would be eligible.
Okay, that was easy. Thank you very much. Second round questions. Oh, first round, Councilmember Sandberg.
I'm prompted to ask a question about the repair itself, given the further examination and the further condition of the garage. Could somebody give an idea what those repairs might look like? And this is in respect to my concern for safety, and would anybody coming into that garage and looking to see what's being shored up or I-beams or what, can somebody give just a brief description as how bad the garage currently is, and what will the appearance of those fixes on the inside look like, and you know what's that going to do to the confidence of the public trying to park in there?
Sure. So you can see what some of those repairs look like. You can see what some of those repairs would look like today when we executed the urgent repairs in 2018. On the east-facing side of the garage, on northbound Walnut Street, there's about a 8-foot by 3-foot steel plate with large, lack of better term, screws that's a shoring technique to stabilize that area of the building. I'll just read a couple of the how they describe the structural repairs from their opinion of probable cost. Ledger beam delamination, column corbel delamination, corroded steel plates, angles, bolts, double T's, wall panels, and stair towers, clean and paint. Exposed corroded steel with spalled concrete, ledger beam undersides, clean and coat. Structural cracks in the concrete, all elements, epoxy injection. So you're going to see stabilization of the structure with large metal, large steel plates. You're going to see, one of the major components of this is redoing the, for lack of better terms, the internal plumbing of the garage, the internal stormwater system of the garage that handles all of the water. That's a major portion of the repairs that would need to be done. A lot of the damage that's occurred is due to water infiltration and the freezing, thawing of that water within the concrete. So there would be a lot of cleaning and painting. There would be a lot of epoxy injection. There would be a lot of steel plates used for stabilization. Those are the sorts of things that would be visible and would take place as part of the repair project.
Okay, and then if I could follow up, even with the shoring up, did I recall hearing in a work session that it might even be less than a 5-year fix for this additional cost?
These are all, the costs are, the best estimates of the engineering firm. The 5-year is the best estimate of the engineering firm if these were to be completed. And that's where, when Council Rallo asked about the question of continuing inspections, we would have an ongoing annual contract with the structural engineering firm for those, whether, they be monthly or quarterly or biannually to start, and then towards the, in year 1, they might be just every 6 months. Year 2, it might be every 4 months. Year 3, it might be every 3 months. Quite honestly, I'm going to defer to the structural engineers on their best estimates on when those should take place and what type of monitoring that should be. By trade, I'm not a structural engineer.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. Earlier, what level of LEED certification did we hope to attain? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Silver. Yeah, silver's always been the intent, I believe.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, but for Park Smart, not LEED.
Park Smart.
Park Smart, yes.
Gotcha.
And their website's pretty dynamic with the information it takes, or with the types of things it takes to achieve those certifications.
Okay, and another thing, and I may be premature with this, administration may have to do some other research or something, but in previous talks, if the garage was to be built, if it was decided, we've talked about a shuttle or people mover type system, and I knew that wasn't part of the plans, and it was a what if this happened. But is there any way we can get some sort of a cost estimate for some sort of a route, between garages and in the downtown area, moving people from? And I know it's difficult. I know that's difficult, but
Councilmember Sims, the answer is always yes, we can.
Okay.
The question is really a longer-term discussion about from where to where, what's the frequency, and what are we trying to accomplish? And so I guess we would need to have a more thorough discussion. One, I think that it's probably time to have with some of the other assets in the downtown that are starting to happen, and the increase in traffic and the tourism and convention center construction that's going to happen, all those things, and the hospital site, the current hospital site structure that we will be making a decision on later this year about whether to keep it or not as part of the hospital purchase. All those things, this is a good time to have that discussion, but it really needs to have a whole lot more discussion points about what are we trying to accomplish with something like that before we could give you a real good estimate of the cost.
okay, thank you. And I want
We'd welcome to have that discussion, though.
I do want to, depending and particularly where the vote goes. But thank you.
All right, I guess everybody has had a first round, so Councilmember Volan was next, and then.
Yes. Are we saying that reversions from various funds are not available under any from certain funds that aren't normally allotted to parking-related expenses are unavailable under any circumstance?
Well,
or that it requires a 2/3 vote of council to transfer funds from one department's budget to another?
As you're aware, over time, as the council has enacted local ordinances to create funds, you've been very specific about those uses for this very reason, so that they are not transferred to other funds. State funds that are created by the state are much the same way. I am only aware of 4 funds based on my knowledge of the fund system that we have, where we could move funds around to repair the garage. General fund, rainy day fund, parking meter, and parking facilities. The parking meter fund would take action by the council and by the controller that a surplus has to be declared available in that fund by me. That would allow you to then move those funds. I've cautioned you about that just because we have costs associated with that program that we're going to need to have, that we should maintain a relatively good balance in that fund, as well as all of our funds. But That said, those are the 4 funds that I'm aware of that could go to fund the repairs of that garage.
So when a fund is referred to as a non-reverting fund, what that means is that dollars appropriated to that fund, even if they're not spent, they stay in the
That's
fund.
correct.
And they cannot be moved.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the
Right.
2 parts of non-reverting, okay.
Okay.
I don't know if this question is for you or for the others, but what is the current estimate for the cost of the first garage Mr. Renison described, the 527 spaces at 78 feet, to the nearest $500,000?
I cannot answer that until design has been completed. As the council is aware, we have a very appropriate structure design with a lot of design elements that are unique to get Park Smart certification, and items that the council negotiated with the administration that it's hard to find a garage comparable to the one we're going to build at the trades or the one we would replace at 4th Street. So it's not as simple as telling you it's $20,000 a space until we design it. And that's relevant to the footprint, the art elements, and all the other elements, the solar panels and all those. So I really can only give you that the range that we've typically seen is somewhere between $22,000 on the low end of space to $33,000 on the high end. And that's a wide range because of all those variables that we will not possibly be able to estimate until we get into the design phase.
So 22, we're looking at anywhere between 11 and $17 million at 527 spaces, roughly.
If you did the math, I trust you.
Okay.
I did not do it in my head.
So what are you asking us to bond for?
Not to exceed the amount that would be necessary to build something that was 550 spaces or less, with all of the elements that we've negotiated that we would like to incorporate into the design of the structure. So this is a resolution requesting you to fund a not to exceed amount.
So when will the bond be, how long will it take you to determine the design of the garage so that you can then bond for it?
There would probably be about a 6-month design discussion that will be very public with stakeholders, and I think, Councilmember Rowland, you weren't able to attend all of our discussions about the Trades District Garage, but those very meetings will start to take place next week for the Trades District Garage, and that public engagement would be the same thing we would repeat if you approve a rebuild of the 4th Street Garage. We would have that at the appropriate time. The architects would bring back a variety of renderings and designs, and then we would just look at our budget and decide what is the appropriate height and decisions that influence all of the factors that we've negotiated with you and the public.
Okay,
And then
so
there
I
would be a
guess my
final
question
determination.
is, how do you, there was a slide that Mr. Crowley presented that talked about the synergy of bonding together for both of them. How is that possible when we're already this far down the path with the Trades Garage?
We always bond for a maximum amount while you're doing design. This is not any different than any other parks project I've done in my career. You have an estimate, and you bond for not to exceed that amount, and what you don't use, you don't use.
That's not the question. I'm asking, how did you propose to bond, to save money by bonding for this together with the Trades Garage, since that one is already several months down the path?
We haven't bonded for that one yet. So they would still be done together so that the economies of scale of doing the bond sale together can still be accomplished.
So how are you going to wait 6 months to bond?
I don't need to have a full design to do a bond. I'm bonding to the maximum amount.
Okay. I have more questions. I'll wait for the rest of them. Thank you.
And when I said I don't mean I. I mean we.
I know what you mean.
We, not me.
I'm going to jump in because it dovetails nicely with the previous question. So the cost savings in issuing this bond now with the Trades District Garage, those cost savings only are realized, or are savings, if eventually we do build a new 4th Street Garage, right?
Of course.
So if we have a vigorous transportation demand management program, we have a downtown shuttle, the economy changes rapidly in the next 5 years, is it possible we won't have to build a new garage?
that's a speculative question. I can't answer that. I don't know. I can't read the 5-year future.
Okay, fair enough. Councilmember Rallo.
My question concerns the 10-year capital improvement plan for the garages, and specifically the 7th Street garage and the Morton garage. It's my understanding that there's still about $750,000 remaining for improvements by 2026 from the Parking Facilities Fund for Morton and 7th Street. I'm just concerned about the balance of the fund and what we can draw from it.
Yeah, over the course of the next, well, and this includes about another 250, no, probably another 400,000 with 4th Street. Between the two over the next, between all 3 garages over the next, through 2026, the capital investments that would be needed to be made are in the $4.9 million range. For Morton and Walnut Street garages specifically, let me run some numbers here, Councilmember Rallo, and I can get that for you.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. We can revisit. We can go on if you'd like.
Other questions from council members? Councilmember Ruff.
This question is probably for Mr. Underwood. On the staff memo in our packet, there's a sentence that says revenue bonds rely on revenues from the project to pay for its costs, but are backed up by an obligation to use property taxes if revenues are insufficient. Can you sort of flesh that out all the way when it comes to this specific project? Because the way it's worded, it sounds like, and I understand the council has the ability to set rates, to set parking rates, but that being said, it sounds like the intention is for the project to pay fully for itself, and that the backup is definitely a backup idea in the event that revenues don't pay for the cost.
This is a revenue bond, which is repaid from a combination of the net revenues of the garage operations and TIF revenues. It does not have and will not have a property tax backup, so we will not be utilizing that. So it's 100%, what we call a 100% revenue bond, so a combination of those revenues. So we'll first take from the net revenues of the garage to pay the debt, and anything remaining will come from TIF revenues. It's not anticipated that the garages will produce at the current rates enough revenue to pay the full bond payment. So it will be a combination.
This sentence in our staff memo, is this a general statement of what revenue bonds are? It's not?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I have to take the privilege of the chair again and jump in here because this just leads to more questions. So you said it's 100% revenue bond, so no property taxes, but aren't TIF funds property taxes? I mean, aren't they taxes on the increased value of property in a district?
As you remember, there are 2 types of tax increment financing districts that you can set up. One is a housing or general housing or a business. We only have business, so we only collect the increment above the base growth on those businesses included in our TIF, 2 TIFs. No residential monies are collected. The base is set. Anything below the base, all those individual units of government continue to collect those funds. Only if there's growth in the AV within the TIF on those businesses is collected by the RDC into the TIF. So technically, they're property taxes, but they are not a pledge of general property taxes. Because they are deemed revenue to the RDC, it does not use the general obligation bonding that we have available to us. If you'll remember, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've issued a TIF bond That was in 2015. Then we issued 2 general obligation bonds. Those are property tax paid bonds. And those were 2 bonds that were rolling off, and we basically renewed those to keep the rate, and we had about $20 million worth of projects that got funded between Parks General Fund and City General Fund. We then proposed the bicentennial bond, which was out of the Parks General Obligation Authority, and that's a property tax base. So that a rate is added to the general property tax rates in the city to repay that debt. Then you approved the Trades District bond, and that's a TIF bond, TIF revenue bond. But there's no backup of the city's general obligation allotment to pay that. So if you do, some communities do that. We typically don't. It enhances the credit because bonds that are a property tax rate are seen as the highest collectible type of bond that you can issue because under the state's constitution, they have to provide the funds through property taxes to pay that debt. So everything that comes in, the first thing that comes in from property taxes is your bond funds because those are sold on the basis that there will be sufficient revenues to pay those. So you typically will have a strict revenue bond. So like all your utility bonds that get sold, those are revenue bonds, pure revenue bonds. The TIF bonds that we've sold in the last 4 or 5 years, those are all revenue bonds. And then we've sold general obligations. We've not had a combination of a revenue bond with a property tax backup.
Thank you. The TIF fund, so that's a property tax on the added value in the TIF district that businesses add through invest. Yes.
Non-residential growth.
So it comes about through growth.
Yes.
So doesn't this growth also require more public services? And isn't that additional money supposed to pay for the public services that that growth entails?
Actually, no, it cannot be. There was a recent court case that said TIF revenues cannot pay for services. They cannot pay for maintenance. They're specifically for development and redevelopment capital projects only. So growth in the city is a combination of residential, commercial, and businesses. That growth gets captured in the increase in the levy, and those general services then are provided through the general fund. In addition, we get local road and street and highway funds from the state, from gasoline taxes and other things that help support those services. So to say that an increase in AV from a business is the only sole increase of needed services would be incorrect because the city has grown population-wise as well each year, and that puts a demand on those services. Obviously, if you build a new building, you've got to have fire service on that building. But if we build 100 new homes, then we have to have fire and police and trash and those kinds of things, and those are different revenue streams. So those services are not provided through the RDC and TIF, and statutorily cannot be.
So in services, do you include roads?
You can construct a road, you cannot repair or maintain it through TIF funds.
Okay. And one final question along these lines. You had responded to, I believe it was Councilmember Ruff, about the revenue bonds and that it's not anticipated that this bond would be repaid through revenues from parking. Do you have an estimate of how much of it would be paid from revenues?
I'll have to go back and look at we presented that the last time. I don't recall offhand.
I think it was 25%. Is that?
I believe that's about right, 25% from garage revenues. And that's subject to increases in, and why we say anticipated is we don't know what action the council may take on the rates to use the garages. You may choose to increase those to include a maintenance a portion and a replacement portion. Currently, those rates do not have that.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Boland.
Okay, so just if I have this straight, the garage cannot be repaired with bond money.
That's correct.
So,
With TIF bond money, technically, you could issue a general obligation bond to repair it, but our financial advisors and legal people and myself would not say, we would tell you not to do that.
it would
It's
not be worth the...
It wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we're in this mess partly because the city collectively, since 1985, has all but foregone maintenance on the 4th Street garage. Desmond says in their report, they recommend that $100 per space per year be set aside for maintenance. Has the administration contemplated how to set aside that money for a new garage? And if so, how would you go about doing it?
I believe that we've discussed this with you, that we've been open to discussing changes to the rates to set that money aside, and that would be a part of the annual appropriation where we could create a fund. You could actually create two funds, one for maintenance, though technically, why do that? You would
Facilities
budget
fund.
for it in the operating budget, and then have a capital replacement fund. If you wanted to have funds available in the future to replace a garage, then you would have a capital replacement as a part of your fee, and you would transfer that money every year, and at the end of 50 years, you would have the funds to reconstruct the garage.
Well, but I mean, we're talking about the necessary ongoing maintenance to make sure the garage lasts 50 years. This garage was supposed to last 50 years. It lasted less than 35 because maintenance wasn't done on it. So, I mean, the reason I'm asking is because I keep hearing how the repair of the garage is going to require ongoing attention that will cost money, which is effectively maintenance. But I'm not hearing that the expense of the new garage is also going to require maintenance if we expect it to last 50 years. So, I mean, it sounds like the administration
I'll defer to Adam, but yes, I believe both he and I have both said, yes, there will be ongoing maintenance. It's obviously like any new structure. You build a new home, you have a warranty for how many ever period, and then you have a little bit of set aside, and then as the structure ages, that amount goes up. So that's what you would see is on a new facility, you would see smaller amounts in the early years, and that would continue to grow as it aged.
Well, all I'm saying is I expect that if we're going to build a new garage, that there's going to be, that's 527 spaces, that we're going to see $52,700 set aside every year solely to support the maintenance of that garage, even if it doesn't get spent right away. I mean, we won't need maintenance when it's new.
Right.
But by the time we do need it, there better be money there.
Yeah, and that would be the idea, is that you would have that money available to you. Just amortize that. What do you need to have the repairs?
Okay.
Put it forward.
So the reason I ask all this is, have we included the overall cost of maintenance over time into the true cost of the new garage? In other words, $52,700 times 50 years is a appreciable amount of money. It's in the millions. That's going to be the part of the total cost of ownership of the garage. And I haven't heard a breakdown of the cost per space of a new garage with that money compared to the cost of repairing it. It seems to me that it winds up becoming something of a wash.
Well, and technically, you would do that on both scenarios. You will do that if you repair the garage and take it forward. As the deputy mayor said, that only buys you 5 years. So we would include 5 years of expenses at a higher level than what the first 5 years of a new garage would be. The repair and maintenance cost for a new garage, actual cost, would be minimal compared to 5 years of a repaired garage. And that will, either scenario, the amount of money necessary to do that will get built into the annual budgets. I think you've seen an increase in the parking facilities fund budget to account for the fact that we are trying to build those costs into that budget so that we have them available and we can do those repairs, $4.9 million worth over the next 10 years.
Again, I'm glad to hear that you're thinking that way. The one thing that's missing is that cost as a part of the estimate. In other words, you can't talk about the cost of maintaining the repair if you don't also talk about the cost of maintaining the new garage. That's the only distinction I was trying to make. Thank you.
Just to add one additional, I totally agree with what you just said. However, in the bond fund, we can't put maintenance funds. We can't hold any of the excess bond fund aside and say, we're going to hold on to this for 20 years and use it for maintenance. Jeff Underwood mentioned, we would have to budget for that out of the parking facilities fund. And we will definitely design a parking budget, a maintenance budget for the new structure once it's designed. Until we have that design, we really don't know what kind of maintenance costs there will be. We could make an estimate and give you that. We could probably do that by next week. But it's just going to be that until we design the structure.
Thank you.
Totally reasonable request. Totally reasonable, not unreasonable. Very reasonable, and it's something we should budget for when we come to you each year for budget proposals.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Other questions, Councilmember Rallo?
So we realize the cost savings if we issue the bond now of $1 million, as this slide describes, rather than waiting. But there must be also increasing construction costs with waiting, is that correct? And that if we waited for 5 years to demolish and rebuild, do you have an estimate, anticipated savings if we act now rather than later?
I don't recall the actual amount. I can find that for you, but it's estimated that the cost of construction index will be at 5% and greater going forward. We're seeing that right now.
Okay.
So these would be costs that we would not be able to save and actually would go away. We would pay. So like the bond interest costs, if we decided in 2 years to come back and revisit it, if we don't do that this time around, would be another $180,000 plus increase in the costs.
Construction costs of 5% per year surely would be in the millions, wouldn't
Yes.
it, after 5 years?
Yeah, it was several $1 million over
Okay.
5, 10, and 15 years. Yes.
Thanks.
Any other council member questions?
I had one other one.
Okay, let me do one, and then we'll go back to Councilmember Rallo. Could somebody speak to how long the garage would be closed if we repair it versus how long it would be closed if we rebuild it?
We had estimated we would be, if it were a repair, the plan that we were working on from your direction, from the last council discussion we had, we would be back open in August. If we go to a rebuild option, we've checked with our project manager. We've obviously lost some time between December and now. We feel like we can make about half that time back up again, and we could have a new structure open before the end of 2020. So 20 months, 19 months versus 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
With all the features that we all want to see in a new structure versus none of those can we do on the existing structure in a repair option.
Councilmember Rallo?
Yeah, my question was about the use by the convention center. So the role of the convention center is that this 4th Street garage would service the anticipated hotel at 3rd and College. I was also wondering about the Graduate Hotel, which is now built, that has, I think, is it correct, it only has 40-some parking spaces, which is competing with on-street parking? Is that correct? I'm just trying to get to...
None of the planning staff is here, so we're all looking around for a planner or Terry to help us with that one.
Well,
we can get that for you for
this
sure.
is the committee meeting, so we could wait until next week for that. But my point is that trying to assess the demand, and those are obvious points of demand, right? So, thanks.
The convention center project anticipated a need of about 1,500 parking spaces. Those were at a full, we don't have a design for that, so we don't know exactly how many square feet will be added at this stage. Assuming it was going to build out like the master plan that was conducted several years ago suggested, it was 1,500 estimated parking spaces. Some of the surface parking in the convention center area today would be lost as a result of the structures that might be built on top of that. So any additional parking spaces we could gain across the street of 4th Street with a rebuild would provide some relief for the anticipated need at the convention center and displaced parking that will happen as a result of structures going over the top of surface lots. And I think we've talked to the council about The city will eventually, if we choose to keep the garage at the hospital, have access to that. That's not that far from the convention center. It might be an option with a shuttle or some other way of also utilizing that structure in the big picture of things. So the best answer to tell you is the hotelier that had been in discussions for the convention center site had envisioned using the 4th Street structure to attach to that hotel property, and certainly had anticipated needing spaces for that hotel, much like what we have at the Hilton Garden Inn and the 7th and Morton Garage.
Thank you.
Any other council questions? Okay, at the risk of beating a dead horse, poor horse, sorry, bad analogy. I do want to just ask once again of Mr. Underwood something about TIF. Sorry. So I just want to make sure I understand. If a business is not in a TIF district, whatever investment they put into their property and the increase in their property tax then goes into our general fund. Is that correct?
It would increase the assessed value of that area, and it would go into the calculation of the tax rate. The levy that we get is the general fund, and then we also get a Parks General Fund. Those are the two funds that get property taxes beyond bonds. So the state sets the maximum, the Constitution says the most we can get is 5% increase each year in our levy. That's set by the 5-year rolling average of non-farm income. Across the state, we all get the same growth quotient.
What I'm trying to get at is, okay, if I have a business, it's not in the TIF district.
It doesn't go into the TIF, it goes into the assessed value for that area, and theoretically will decrease the property tax rate for that township, because the AV has grown in that township,
I see.
of which the city is part of that rate.
Right. Okay, so the difference is if I invest $1 million in a business that's not in the TIF, that will increase the assessed value of the city as a whole.
Non-TIF areas, you're right.
And that will lead to perhaps lower rates
Correct.
for other property taxpayers.
For all property taxpayers in
property
that,
taxpayers.
yes.
Okay. So if I have a business in the TIF, that extra $1 million that I invested, the taxes on that, do not go to the benefit of all the taxpayers. They go to whatever the redevelopment commission and the council decide should be invested in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, that's all I needed. All right, seeing no other council member questions, we will go to the audience. If anybody would like to speak to this issue tonight, please feel free to step to the microphone. There is a sign-in sheet. Actually, Mr. Renison, could you leave that on the desk? Yeah, so people can sign in right before they even get to the podium. Please do sign in and then state your full name. And we will, should we, let's, how many people want to speak to this issue? Let's do 4 minutes, because else we will be here all night. So let's do a 4-minute limit. Please, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Talisha Kopic with Downtown Bloomington, and thank you, Council, for revisiting the 4th Street parking garage decision. It's a big one for downtown, and on behalf of Downtown Bloomington, Inc., we support rebuilding the parking garage to make it bigger and better to address demands of a vibrant downtown. The number of attendees at special events and attractions continues to grow. The number of employees and residents in the downtown has more than doubled since the original garage was built. We want to strengthen downtown into the future, and a new garage with additional capacity can help do that. We're excited about downtown restrooms, charging stations, better street presence, aiding an expanded convention center to bring visitors closer to the downtown, and of course additional parking spaces to help our existing businesses in their day-to-day activities. Thank you for your consideration. This is a crucial decision for encouraging small businesses and attractions to be in the downtown area. Thank you.
Hi, Rachel Robertson with Four Winds Lakeside Inn and Marina. Won't take 4 minutes. We, of course, are the only hotel on Lake Monroe. And so it is vital to our guests, especially during the summer months when they're paying peak rates and supporting local taxes, the 5%, the 7%, the 1% food and tax. They need to come in town too. They're not just here for Lake Monroe, although it's the fun part. They want to come to Bloomington. They want to enjoy the shows. They want to see IU. They need more safe parking. When I come in town for meetings, I don't have hardly anywhere to park anymore. And it makes it really difficult for me to do business in downtown Bloomington. I have more and more people coming to Four Winds to meet me because I can't meet them in Bloomington. So I just really ask that we have a rebuild. Four Winds stands behind building that thing all over again. We don't want concrete falling on our cars anymore. So it would be nice to rebuild. Yes, I did have a piece of concrete fall on my car one time.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, my name is Daniel Bingham. I'm going to try to compress this. I've been told I would have 10 minutes to give this, and I'm going to try to compress it to 4. I went through our 2016 greenhouse gas inventories, and I generated emissions targets for us from those. We need to hit these targets by 2030, 2040, and 2050. Could you go to the... We've got to cut emissions by 45%. In 10 years, we got to get to 0. In 30 years, go to the next one. Can you go to... These are our current emissions drawn straight from that emissions inventory. These are in metric tons of CO2 equivalent. You can go to the next. This is what we need to do over the next 30 years. We need to cut them in half, and then in half again, and then to 0. Yeah, that's like a cutoff. At the bottom, it's a row of zeros. This is transportation. Again, every 10 years, we've got to cut it in half until we get to 0, or we face catastrophic consequences. The IPCC, the International Body on Climate Change, they used the word catastrophic. And for just like an inkling of what those are, the Midwest is underwater right now. People are drowning. People are dead. Farms are destroyed. We have to hit these targets. We have no choice. Can you go to the next? I calculated, this is waste and natural gas. Next one. Sorry, I'm blowing through this. I thought I had a lot more time. That's what it would cost to hit the energy grid target. $1.2 billion with solar. For 2030, that's just the 2030 target. That's not getting to 0. That's replacing, putting enough solar on the grid that we offset Bloomington's electricity grid pull. That's incredibly expensive. We can look at wind and hydro. The prices are likely to be similar. That's one we have no choice around. Like, we can try to cut energy use, but at the end of the day, the energy grid, it's going to be on that order. This is transportation. If we try to keep driving at the rates we are now, you can roughly estimate that there are on the order of 40,000 electric cars in Bloomington. By 2030, 45, or not electric cars, on the order of 40,000 cars in Bloomington. By 2030, 45% of them would have to be electric cars. The cheapest electric car is a Smart 42. To replace 45% of the cars in Bloomington with Smart 42s is like $500 million. We can't afford that. That's $48 million a year. We can't keep driving at these rates. We've got to make those cuts, and we can't do it if we keep driving. Can you go to the next? If we keep driving electric cars, scroll down a little bit, we have to add additional solar capacity. That chart is from the Department of Energy's website. Right now in Indiana, if you're driving an electric car and charging it from the grid, the emissions are higher than if you were driving a hybrid. It's that bad. So if we're going to make these cuts by continuing to drive electric cars, we have to install enough additional solar capacity that we can fully charge all those electric cars. To do that for 45% of the cars in Bloomington, we'd have to install an additional $64 million of solar capacity. Again, this is absurdly expensive. Can you go to the next? If we do this through bike infrastructure, on the other hand, a mile of bike lane protected by parked cars is between $8,000 and $16,000. For protecting it with jersey barriers per mile, it's like $80 to $160. For planters, which look beautiful, it's between $80,000 and $400,000. That's like outlining roughly the major thoroughfares in Bloomington. It's only about 35 miles of roadway. If we were to build out barrier-protected bike lanes on all of that roadway, we're looking at like $5 million. Can you go to the next? For building out transit, currently our transit budget's $10 million. Less than we're going to spend on this garage, incidentally. Like half of what we're talking about spending on this garage. Bloomington Transit runs 9 routes. In a previous discussion, it came up that it's about $100,000 to add a new bus to an existing route. It's reasonable to estimate that adding a whole new route is like $1 to $2 million. We're talking about a totally different order of magnitude here. It's like a 10th to 100th the cost to hit those emissions targets by building out bike and transit infrastructure than it is to continue to try to keep driving at the same rates we are. We are talking about this garage paying itself back through parking. Thank you.
And I want to apologize to Mr. Bingham. I think there may have been a misunderstanding about timing and such. Hopefully, we can have another opportunity to more calmly go through your data. Thank you.
I'd like to briefly, if I might, say thank you to Ms. Rhodes for flipping those slides. That's our council attorney. She's amazing.
Okay, next up.
Hi, I'm Jim Rosenbarger. Couple comments. I still think greenwashing a garage is insulting. Let's be real. This is not a green piece of infrastructure. I think the most ungreen part about it, brown, is that parking garages downtown drive suburban sprawl. I mean, we've lived with that in the Midwest particularly. I mean, I'm familiar with Louisville. They have acres of downtown structured parking. The place is dead at night. The county is sprawled. The same thing's true of almost any Midwestern city. There's an effort to build up the downtown with the idea that somehow that's going to be green. It's not. Downtown parking structures drive sprawl. Families are faced with a choice. Do I come into town, pay higher taxes, end up with a smaller house, try to walk to work to save? Or do I hop in my car, buy a cheaper house, larger, bigger yard, and pay fewer taxes? The economics for that are, how do you go against that? I think it's ridiculous to talk about doing traffic demand management after we build an oversupply of parking spaces. It's just economics 101. You have so many widgets, and the more you make, the cheaper per unit they are. I mean, we're going to be in a place where we're trying to attract people to use parking garages, or we're going to have empty spaces. I spent a short time in London just the past week. I saw one parking garage in the entire city. I probably walked 50 miles. I was on a raised train going through an area where they build high-rises. I saw a parking structure in that area. London is extremely wealthy. The streets are covered with people and cars, but I didn't see any structured parking. It's a fabulous place to visit. It's very wealthy. It's doing quite well without parking structures. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, and please be sure to sign in, everybody.
Hello, I'm Mark Stossberg. I serve the city on the Bloomington Bicycle Pedestrian Safety Commission. I also work in the field of transportation demand management. I want to bring back something that in the Desmond study that the City of Richmond commissioned, one of their findings was that, I'll just read it, before investing in additional structured parking in the downtown, consideration should be given to implementing efforts to reduce parking demand for employees and residents. And I understand this because I study the field. The science and data is that transportation demand management is more effective when the supply is limited, and efforts to do that are damaged and compromised when there is an oversupply of parking. And already we have committed to the Trades District garage, which is being built on anticipated demand that will be there. Right now, especially with the 4th Street garage closed, we really have an opportunity to work on transportation demand management because now's the time to be creative about finding parking spots. And I advise you to follow the advice of your consultants on that point. Part of my job also involves risk in estimating large, complex projects. The repair option minimizes risk. It's shorter term. There's a lot of things we don't know that are unknowns about the 50-year projection about our transportation needs. There are a lot of things that are causing parking to trend down. fewer Americans getting driver's license, driver miles are flat, increased concern about the very real problem, possibility of climate catastrophe, shared mobility is on the rise, autonomous abilities on the rise. All these make it really hard to project our parking demand for the next 50 years. 5 years from now, we'll have a much better opportunity. There's also talk of this projects going over budget. Your small repair project could go 10% over budget. Your $18 million project could go over budget too. So by looking at a smaller scope, you reduce your risk fiscally. So it's a sound opportunity. Even if there's a second closure, one for now for repair and another one to rebuild, again, that's another opportunity to practice transportation demand management. It doesn't have to be seen as a negative. And again, you minimize your risk by forecasting that way. Recent research from the city of Palo Alto found that it was cheaper to pay for transportation demand management solutions than it was to pay for structured parking. The only way it was more expensive is if you gave people like $10,000 a year to live closer to work. But for the most part, it's cheaper to deal with parking from the supply side. So it's a physically sound to look at a reduced supply. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up.
Hi, Jim Murphy, president of CFC Properties. I want to thank you first and foremost for bringing us back to the table for discussion to discuss the fate of the downtown 4th Street parking garage, but also the fate of downtown, many of the businesses downtown. Your decision tonight is going to impact the near and distant future of downtown Bloomington, but particularly business owners. Many mom and pop stores, many invest their life savings in these stores. They're entrepreneurs. At the present, downtown is active, vibrant, very alive. We're envied by other communities throughout the state of Indiana and beyond. We have a lot of not-for-profits and entertainment venues downtown, but it has not always been this way. And that's why I have a few pictures I want to show you. Many years ago, this is the Cochran House at 8th and Rogers Street. That's what it looked like. Turn to the next one if you would. And this is the depot at 7th and Morton Street. So we're getting closer to downtown. These buildings were vacant, had been vacant for a long, long time. This is, I don't know if you guess or not, this is Fountain Square. And literally that building is about ready to fall into the street. And coincidentally, the 4th Street parking garage is connected to Fountain Square that helps provide services for Fountain Square in the downtown. And the final photograph I have for you is the Grand Plaza. And this building sat vacant for 8 years until Bill Cook and the then mayor, Frank McCloskey, was able to get together and have a conversation. Bill Cook said, I will buy and restore that property if the city builds a parking garage. And they did. And they did it on a handshake. Can't do that today, can we? Mm-hmm. But they did do that. But the purpose for me showing these is to remind us of how fragile downtown Bloomington is. Not that I am suggesting that it would go back to these conditions, but parking is so valuable, and if we do not provide parking necessary, it is going to have an impact on businesses. It's going to have an impact on the community. It's going to have an impact on the tourism downtown. I think Mick mentioned that earlier. And the bottom line is, predecessors before you had many, many tough, difficult decisions to make. Like you, they listened to the facts of the experts, they listened to the testimonials of the public, and they made their decision like you're going to make your decision based on the information that you have before you. The reality is that we know is that there will be a hole in the ground at some point in time in the future. So if we just repair it, are we simply kicking the can down the road and spending a lot of money in the process and creating uncertainty for the downtown users, whether they be entertainment goers, whether they be restaurant goers or shoppers? And I truly believe that we need to take a very serious look at this and invest in taking down the existing parking structure at 4th Street and building a new one. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
By the way, 4 minutes is ticking down, 3 minutes at a beep, and then 15, and then 3:45 is a beep. Yeah, you get one more minute. So
Please.
let him finish.
Thank you.
Sure.
We did not know the rules.
My apology. It's the nature of this timer. So please take one more minute.
Okay, thank you. So again, like the gentleman before, I was trying to rush through this rather quickly, but it's inevitable at some point in time that I think this garage is going to have to be replaced. So why would we want to spend the amount of money that I'm hearing tonight with uncertainty, knowing that at some point in time, future generations, future councils are going to have to make that decision to replace that parking garage. And at the same time, if you do make the decisions to tear it down and build new, as was mentioned earlier by Deputy Mayor Van Eisen, the convention center expansion and the hotel for the convention center is going to need additional parking, and that is a very important and valuable part of the convention center expansion, and I think that should be
15
considered as
seconds.
well. Thank you.
Okay. Again, so it beeps at 1 minute and then 15 seconds. When it starts beeping continuously, then you're done. 4 minutes, Ms. Martin.
Good evening. I'm Jane Martin, and I appreciate the chance to speak for the 4th Street Garage in whatever version you and your wisdom decide, whether it's repair or repair sounds to me, based on the numbers I heard tonight, rather short-sighted, given we have to do it again at increasing costs. But I'm speaking tonight for the 4th Street Garage on behalf of startup businesses and the tech community. I applaud your efforts to green our economy. We can't do it overnight. If we had the public infrastructure of London, we would all take public transport to work and to the opera. It's going to take a while to do that, and we need the parking garage. Most of our startup companies drive, carpool, bike to work, or walk to work. Some of them can't afford to live downtown, so they have no choice. So there's a lot of problems in trying to eliminate cars overnight. We have a problem in Bloomington. Our wages have stagnated since the last recession. In the last 10 years, since 2008, our average wages have not recovered to the 2008 level. A second problem is we're losing population growth in the critical 18 to 34 age group. These are two benchmarks for the health of a local economy. I'm worried about Bloomington. I'm worried we're going to get left behind in the new economy if we don't plan for businesses with 2 to 5 employees. Who is Bloomington working for today? I think it's working for folks who work at IU. I think it's working for retirees who are happy to enjoy our arts culture and to live in a service economy that pays minimum wage with no benefits. It's working for our government employees. Who isn't it working for? It's not working for minimum wagers. It's not working for young professionals. It's not working for graduates. They're going to other states, Texas, Colorado, to boost their economy because they're unable to stay here. It's also not working for our mid-level employees who need retraining because they're in old economy jobs. We need infrastructure to support Bloomington's new economy. We can't afford to lose 500 parking spots in downtown Bloomington. I'm going to give you 3 examples of companies that need that parking. Secretly Canadian is a company, stealth company. They bring 150 folks from all over the world to Bloomington for a music conference. This is Google Music, Apple Music. They represent Yoko Ono. They need parking. The B Corp, a 23-year-old IU graduate working on food security to save the bees, chose to locate her business here. This summer, she'll bring the Forbes Ag Tech Summit to Bloomington. They need parking. Is my time up?
A little bit more.
Hennepin Marketing, 75 employees.
Now your time is
Now
up.
my
I'm
time's
sorry.
up. These are clean, high-paying jobs, and I encourage you to support our high-tech economy with parking infrastructure. Thank you.
First, I want to thank the council for opening this to
Your
the
name,
public.
sir?
Pardon?
Your name.
My name is Lloyd Stoller,
Thank you.
and I bought a property at 115 South Walnut called the Baker Building in August, and I anticipated there would be parking. I have a business there, and I'm able to, I have a tenant for another, there's 2 floors. I'm on 1 floor, and the tenant's on the other floor. I have about 6 employees, and I believe my tenant has a similar number. Not everybody is able to walk to work. Not everybody is able to ride a scooter to work. In fact, I'd be okay if nobody rode a scooter to work, but that's a whole different issue. My point is, I would really like to see something done at 4th Street, either repair it or replace it, but let's just don't leave it closed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time and thoughtfulness this evening. My name's Lynn Coyne. I'm president of Bloomington Economic Development Corporation. We support construction of a new garage. An adequate supply of parking is essential to maintaining an economically successful and vibrant downtown. It makes long-term economic sense and supports the city's own vision and plan for downtown Bloomington, a vision and plan that has been executed for quite some time. As pointed out in the city's vision statement adopted by the City Council and incorporated into the city's comprehensive plan, a core principle is to nurture our vibrant and historic downtown as the flourishing center of the community. The city's comprehensive plan describes the downtown as, quote, compact, urban, high-intensity, mixed-use center that serves regional, community-wide, and neighborhood markets, unquote. It also states that the downtown, quote, serves as the social and economic heart of Bloomington by providing land use choices that accommodate residents, businesses, shoppers, and visitors. To achieve this vision and these planning goals, parking is essential. The plan anticipates parking when it states in building choices, quote, preferring multi-story parking garages to surface parking lots, unquote. To give an indication of how successful this strategy has been to this point, we extracted property tax information from the Elevate GIS website for properties immediately around the courthouse. Since the general assessment in 2002, the total assessed value of those 29 properties increased from just over $9 million to over $26 million. The 2018 tax bill for those properties is over $500,000. This represents a massive investment in our downtown and income to the city following the vision and plan that the council put forth. And this is just for the properties around the square. This doesn't include all of the apartments and properties off the square. The city had a goal to create a live, work, and play urban environment. We have created the live part by building multifamily housing, mostly apartments for students. We have created the work part by being the center of our entrepreneurial, innovation, and technology sector. And we've created the play part with the many restaurants, theaters, events, festivals, and similar activities and sites, such as the Waldron Arts Center, Buskirk Chumley, and Wonderlab. What we haven't done yet is combine them. Living is reserved mostly for students and is not affordable to others, as Ms. Martin pointed out earlier. Workers need to commute into downtown, and residents, visitors, and tourists need to drive into downtown to play. This is all as anticipated by the City Council's own vision and plan. This is why it is so important to maintain what we have all worked so hard to create. As to the issue of driving cars, if they don't commute downtown, they're going to be working somewhere else and driving much further distances. Going forward, we should not arbitrarily reduce parking, but focus on providing meaningful access to the downtown through mass transit. An urban environment needs mass transit to realize its potential. The CISI's vision statement adds, quote, provide a safe, efficient, accessible, and connected system of transportation that emphasizes public transit, walking and biking to enhance options to reduce overall dependence on the automobile. We have talked at length about walking and biking. We need to now talk about public transit, including park and ride. Combining parking garages, is that?
That's time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, be sure to sign in, please, everybody.
Good evening, council members. My name is Jeff McKim, and I currently serve on the Monroe County Council, and I also work downtown. I'm a remote worker and otherwise would be working from home, but I choose to work downtown and pay out of my own pocket to do so because of the exciting and vibrant culture and community that we have here. I often eat 3 meals a day downtown and do most of my shopping as well, and I'm here to speak in favor of rebuilding the 4th Street Garage. I appreciate the difficulty of your decision and applaud your diligence in considering all facets of the issues. I particularly applaud your willingness to put climate change at the forefront of this debate, as global climate change is undeniably an existential threat to our society and potentially our species. So coming both from these hyper-personal and global contexts, I just want to make 3 brief comments. Compact urban form is our ally as we collectively try to address climate change. It's been well established in the literature that more compact urban spaces are greener spaces. The density enables transit for both non-discretionary and discretionary riders. The compact form mitigates stormwater flooding. But to be effective, that compact urban form also requires a vibrant and resilient local downtown economy with a mix of employers, not just entertainment-related businesses catering to students and visitors. And the vibrant and resilient economy requires that people, employees, employers, and visitors be able to park. A parking structure is the most economically and ecologically efficient way to allow them to park. And once they park in that garage, they are, to paraphrase Councilmember Sturbaum, converted into pedestrians. There is no evidence that within number 2, there is no evidence that within the time horizon contemplated for this garage that people will no longer be driving cars. Cars will undoubtedly be differently fueled and could be vastly more efficient if the price of fuel accounted for the carbon emissions as well. But that's an issue of national and global scale. Simply making it more difficult to park downtown Bloomington will not reduce overall greenhouse emissions. It might just encourage businesses, visitors, and employees to take their businesses and their emissions elsewhere. And third, it's absolutely appropriate to work towards decreasing the level of subsidy from the TIF district. There's no God-given right to free parking, and increasing the user's share of the burden for this facility is a worthy goal. Unfortunately, it can be pursued separately from the decision to rebuild the garage. The fact that the current pro forma shows such a high degree of subsidy from the TIF district does not mean that it's the way that things always have to be. You have the opportunity to move forward on the garage now and then adjust the user fees to meet your policy goals. You've been left with a facility that is functionally obsolete and unfortunately has been allowed to become structurally deficient. Continuing to patch this structure is just throwing good money after bad. You have an opportunity here to reaffirm your commitment to compact urban form, which requires a vibrant downtown business community. I urge you to demonstrate that commitment by supporting the reconstruction of the 4th Street Garage. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up.
See if I can get this to work. My name is Caleb Aaron Crane. I'm a constituent from Representative Granger's district. I have 2 brief things that I would like to say, one of which coincides with another issue that will be coming in front of the council soon. As we move forward in deciding whether to rebuild or repair the 4th Street Garage, I would encourage the council to consider the fact that you're being asked to give money on a design that you don't even know anything about. Would you go out and buy a computer without understanding the specs behind it? So in understanding and figuring out what is the best decision for the city, we should be financially responsible. We shouldn't be asked to blindly give money to a project that hasn't even been designed yet. Second, with the parking garage issue, yes, there are going to be more cars on the road. So I would strongly encourage the council to consider the effect of increased parking and road traffic as they look at the electric scooter rental issue that will be coming in front of the council later. Because the electric scooters make sidewalks inaccessible for people like me. We are eventually on the road. And because we are also on the road, we are now at more risk by getting hit by these cars that will be going to these parking structures. So as you decide whether to repair, rebuild, or move forward from the 4th Street Garage, please consider these issues as you make your decision.
Thank you. Next up.
Hi, my name's Ingrid Faber, and we actually do have solar panels, and we both drive hybrid cars, and we really do think about the environment. I think that our dilemma is we do live on the east side, and coming downtown isn't always that easy without finding parking, and we find that we are constantly struggling to find a parking spot to park, and now with the 4th Street Garage down, there's even less parking. I think being at the meeting tonight, I assumed that we were going to repair it, and then I guess there were some issues, and now they're thinking about rebuilding it. Personally, I think that maybe if we spend $1.4 million to kind of repair this, it might not be good in the long run. Until we can't really compare ourselves to Europe, we don't have the same public transportation. I grew up there. I know excellent public transportation. I walked a lot. Bloomington is not that type of town. So for me, I personally do wish that we could, spend the money and invest in a new garage. Even if you get an electric car, you do have to park that damn thing, so you will need parking. And I think with Bloomington, and as much as all these high-rises are getting built, but there's no parking, I do find it a problem in our town. So anyways, I just wanted to make that point. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Anna Dragovich. I live in District 4. I have just a few points that I'd like to share with you. One is that I believe that the downtown can still be successful without cars by getting people to use other modes. We're all assuming that we can only get to downtown by car, but that's not true. If we were to invest in other modes, we could get people there by those other modes. I also hear that we are expecting sort of the government to help us to solve our climate crisis, but it really needs to take us upon our own lifestyles to change. And so by that, I mean we should start encouraging ourselves to bike and walk and take transit. I hear that we can't do this overnight, but I believe that it's forks in the roads like this that either keep us where we are right now or move us towards a more sustainable climate. I also want to say that I do not think that parking is economic development. I think that there is an old way of thinking where we thought that building convention centers and building stadiums and building parking garages in our downtown would bring people downtown. And I think a person that spoke earlier before gave the example of Louisville, Kentucky, where it's oftentimes empty at night because nobody lives down there. And so I'll say that again, parking is not economic development. We've been wrong in this thinking that automobile use means economic development, but the reality is that auto use increases with economic development only because wealth allows more driving. I'll say that again, wealth allows more driving, not that increased driving leads to wealth. I also want to echo another person's comments that said that building this garage to LEED standards and a Park Smart garage is insulting. Slapping solar panels on a major trip generator in a place that generates a lot of fossil fuels is very insulting. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matt Flaherty. I don't doubt that everyone here tonight is well-intentioned, and I appreciate the public conversation. But that said, I think we need to be clear-eyed about climate change and about justice and equity in our community and what that means. All I have ever asked for in the context of these parking garages is that we stop heavily subsidizing parking. I think 25% was the figure mentioned by the comptroller earlier. If there's a need for a bigger parking garage, let the private market provide it and let people pay the real cost. It's really that simple. Have we lost all faith in capitalism? That was a joke. The point is, no one is stopping a developer from building a parking garage if it's profitable. We're not prohibiting parking. We're saying pay the real cost. Another woman mentioned the new economy. The new economy means a just and sustainable economy. You'll notice that most people advocating against building a bigger garage and subsidizing parking are under the age of 40. We don't want subsidized parking. We want a livable climate. What will attract people here is quality of place, investment in transit, investment in walking and biking infrastructure. That's what creates a vibrant downtown, not sprawl subsidized by subsidized parking. In the midst of a climate crisis, it makes absolutely no sense to continue to use tax dollars to provide below market rate parking for everyone. This is a blanket subsidy that perpetuates climate change, benefits wealthy folks who don't need it, and leaves behind our poorest citizens. According to US Census data, many of the poorest people in our community do not drive at all because they cannot afford a car. That's not my opinion, that's the facts. Meanwhile, our transit system is tragically underfunded. When we spend $18 million in taxpayer dollars subsidizing a parking garage, and it's actually much more than that when you include debt service, that's money we can't spend elsewhere. For instance, with that money, we could bond for 25 fully electric buses or more and solar panels to cover Bloomington Transit's storage facility. The buses would have zero emissions, which would help us meet our city and our mayor's commitment on climate change. And electric buses also have significantly lower maintenance costs. This would free up a lot of money for Bloomington Transit's operations and maintenance, meaning we could run more frequent and expanded service. No longer would our poorest community members face the challenges of not being able to get to their job or the grocery store on a Sunday, or missing a work shift because they have to wait another hour when they miss their bus by 2 minutes. Transit would be clean and viable. And for those who still want to drive, of course they can. You could park in any number of metered spots that are always open several blocks from downtown and walk a few blocks. You could park on the west side of Rogers, where it's literally free to parkers. You could park in one of our garages that aren't full on Morton Street or on North Walnut, and that's from the Desmond study. Never have those been full at any period of observation. Let's see. So again, members of the business community have repeatedly said that they are willing to pay the actual unsubsidized cost of parking, and if that's the case, then the city doesn't need to build a garage. Let the private market do it, or repair this garage, charge an unsubsidized price for parking, and wait to see if we really need 200 more spaces. That's the real value here. We don't know, which is why repair makes sense. I'm going to leave you with a quote from Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish climate activist who inspired 1.4 million children to strike from school 2 weeks ago demanding climate action, including 250 at our State House in Indiana. She said at last year's UN climate conference, quote, "In the year 2078, I will celebrate my 75th birthday. If I have children, maybe they will spend that day with me. Maybe they will ask me about you. Maybe they will ask why you didn't do anything when there was time to act. You say you love your children above all else, and yet you're stealing their future in front of their very eyes. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it like it's a crisis." End quote. This is our truth. This is our reality. This is our crisis, whether you like it or not. I understand that change is scary, change is hard, but the status quo is disaster. We have to do better. We have to change. It's that simple. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Teal Larson. I'm a Bloomington resident. It just has occurred to me listening to comments tonight that a lot of people are talking about the past and the present of Bloomington's downtown and basing a lot of their ideas about what we should do with this garage on what has happened or what the current state is. And I would say that we need to think about what our downtown could be. So a more bikeable, a more walkable downtown has a lot of benefits to the community, to businesses. We know that the slower a person moves past a business door, the more likely they are to walk in and spend money. Cities all over the world are making changes to make their downtowns or their cities in general more walkable and bikeable in the face of the climate crisis. A great example of this is Oslo, Norway. They closed off their downtown completely to cars and saw a 10% increase in pedestrians. So to the business community, I would say, would a 10% increase in people moving slowly past your front door be a boon to your business, or would it damage it? I think it's really important that we think about the example we saw earlier of the crumbling downtown, and how was it saved? It was saved by somebody thinking outside the box and saying, we don't have what we need right now. At the time, cars were the answer. Cars are not the answer right now. We're sticking with the answer to an old problem when our world has changed completely. Other people mentioned the lack of growth in the young population in Bloomington. younger generations, younger populations want more walkable and bikeable cities. We don't want to be stuck in our cars all the time. We're reading psychological studies about how being stuck in your car commuting causes severe anxiety. It builds up over time. We know that we can be happier and healthier if we're part of a vibrant community, and that includes our spaces where we spend our money. So that's all I have to say. I just really think that we should be a little bit less afraid of how change could possibly maybe damage something, and be a little bit open-minded to how positive changes could actually make our community a lot better.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Abby Gardner. Thanks for hearing us all today. I am a neighbor to Councilman Ruff, so in his district. See him biking all the time, and I think it's awesome. I am a new mother in town, and just am gonna feel like I'm murmuring many other young people who I've seen up here. But I do think that we need to take this as an opportunity of how our town is spending our money, and think about opportunities about what our town could be. Like, we used to have high marks in as a bikeable city, and we no longer have any of those marks. I am so eloquent. But it clearly does not take as much money as a lot of these proposed parking garages are to make our streets feel safe for someone to bike, for someone to walk, for someone who's using their wheelchair to be on the sidewalk so that people can scoot around in a bike lane that's now non-existent in our town. I think all of these are opportunities for our infrastructure, and it's all with how we're spending money. I just think we can use all of this as a potential to think larger. And to attracting people that are our age, my age, some of the other speakers in our town. I don't think that many people are sticking around because we don't have much money, job opportunities for much money in our town, and maybe that's a separate issue, but also not. I'm not very good at this, but just a concerned citizen, thank you for hearing me. I do think we need to be wise about how we're spending our money, and maybe think beyond cars and parking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mike McAfee. I'm the Executive Director for Visit Bloomington. I want to thank everybody again for re-examining this. I do want to say those last comments, since this is on the record, Bloomington is still the only, bike-friendly certified city in the state of Indiana, I believe, so that we haven't lost any of those marks. 2.4 million visitors come here a year, 96% of them drive. The average party size is 2.5, that's 900,000 cars a year that are coming into our community from visitors. Half of them are going to Indiana University, but half of them are finding places to park, definitely in our downtown area. So I applaud you. I couldn't agree with you more about we need to decrease our carbon footprint over the next few years, but it's not going to happen in the next 5 years. We sold over 600,000 hotel room nights last year. That was an 80,000 increase from the year before. All that demand, all those numbers are only going to increase in the coming years. We definitely need this garage. Visit Bloomington supports building a new garage. Thanks.
Hi, Kate Rosenberger. I live in Prospect Hill. Sorry about my sniffs. I have a cold. So my comments tonight are just a series of questions, really, just for me thinking about this over the past couple months. So one question I have is, why do we look at our parking garages one at a time instead of a comprehensive parking plan? We have agreed to build the one new trades garage, and we will most likely be building a new garage for the convention center. And when the hospital goes away, we'll have a garage there too that we can use. So, and we already, of course, have other garages. So I think thinking about parking in a more comprehensive way and like total number of spots in downtown would be good for us. I know people have talked about a circulator. connect garages and connect big points downtown, and I think that would be really handy for the new convention center garage and the hospital that will be abandoned in a few years. Some people have mentioned this, but why are we in the business of building parking garages? I don't know that that's a city's responsibility, and I think if the market demands it, private companies would build it. Another question I have is, we haven't talked a lot about debt service, so are we considering debt service here? We talk about the trade garage being $11 million, but if we look at a traditional, I'm not a bond expert at all, so if we look at just traditional payback, like monthly compounding over a 22-year period, that's $19 million. And if we look at the bond for this garage, 18.5 over 22 years, that's $33.4 million. So it's a lot more than the 18.5 that we're talking about. A big question I have is, for each council person, you know, how many spots is enough for you? I think it's an interesting question to think, do we have enough parking downtown? Or we're adding garages one at a time, and we're thinking about adding spots to garages. So like, when is it enough? When do you feel like that's enough? I'm also, like Matt, gonna leave you with a quote. This is from the mayor of Bogota. He said, "An advanced city is not one where even the poor have cars, but rather one where even the rich use public transport." Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Quentin Thompson. I live on Kinzer Pike. I was born and raised in Bloomington. I'm a graduate student who studies energy, water, and economic development at SPIA. I'm here against the demolition, and I'm here for the redevelopment and the extension for the 5-year period. I think there's 2 major reasons why we shouldn't demolish and then rebuild for a new parking garage. The first says it's not financially sound to subsidize this, and second, it's unsustainable and against all of our progressive ideals. To demolish a parking garage and then rebuild another parking garage for $18 million in the same place for a small increase in parking availability is not a good use of finances. You're spending roughly $30,000 to build each parking spot for an only additional 200 parking spots. That's insane. On Monday, Jim Sims stated that the council is the financial body of the city and that the power of the council is to field financially poor plans. This is obviously a poor use of our finances, especially given the context of a new parking garage being built in the trades district. Furthermore, all modern research from IU, Purdue, Ball State demonstrates that the environmentally friendly placemaking is a top economic development strategy. Auto-centric infrastructure is no longer the major method of economic development. Why use our finances for this dated strategy? And who's benefited when we do this? Is it everyone? Second, given the proliferation and hard and specific evidence on human-caused climate change, we cannot continue to build new parking garages. Despite the claims by the administration that there's no way to make an optimally green parking garage, the cement industry is the 2nd largest greenhouse gas emitter worldwide behind power generation. Slapping solar panels to this project will be negligible offset against the carbon emitted in the building and the use of the parking garage. Furthermore, we know how automobile use contributes to climate change. We need to end the subsidies of fossil fuel use. That will incentivize other forms of transportation. I'm not asking you to do something radical. I'm asking you to stop using government subsidies to incentivize our carbon use. I'm asking you to stop putting government money towards increased carbon emissions. All the candidates during Monday's Democratic debate stated that they're for the new Green Deal. Well, this is it. Put your money where your mouth's at. This garage will structurally lock us into the same practices for the next 20 to 30 years, leaving the burden to change to my generation, a compounding burden. I realize you will not see the benefit of divesting from fossil fuel subsidies, but I will, and your grandchildren will ask, what did you do with your power to combat climate change? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Vox. Thank you, Council, for having us here today.
Your full name, please.
Vox Bookeroom,
Thank you.
candidate, City Council at large. I'm not going to rehash this with all the details and the data. I'm going to say that we need to listen to these young and passionate folks. A lady earlier mentioned that Bloomington is losing its youth population, those folks under 35. You've got a plethora of eloquent and intelligent, educated folks here tonight that are in that demographic that told you what they wanted. They told you that we don't want to drive, we want to have a city that's bike-friendly, we want to have a city that uses alternative means of transportation, we want to invest in our future. I think every candidate for city council at large and several of the district candidates tonight have all spoken that we repair this garage rather than tear it down and build a new one. There's no way that you can say that that is the greenest option. I don't care who they have certify, it's just putting lipstick on a pig. We know that building that new structure is not what we want to do. I'm going to urge you once again to make the same smart decision you made to begin with. Tell the city that we don't want to borrow from the future. There's the adage that we borrow the earth from our children rather than they inherit it from us. We need to make sure that we live up to that and that we make wise decisions for our future, because a lot of folks have come up here and they said, well, it's important that we talk about climate change, but this isn't going to happen in 5 years. That's not the dynamic. This needs to be a thing that has to happen in 10 years. It's not a laughable situation anymore. In my 35-year lifespan, I can tell you that the climate has changed in a tremendous way. Everyone on council understands that. I grew up as a kid, playing through feet of snow every year. Today, that's something that young folks can't imagine. The climate is changing. It's going to be a catastrophe. It's going to override the economy. It's something that we have to take on now. I thank you, and I cede my time.
Hi, I'm Jean Kampler, and it seems like every time there's a debate about building parking or not building parking, should we build parking or should we not, and encourage people to take alternative transportation, oftentimes the decision is to build the parking, and then I wait and I don't see any bold plan to build the infrastructure we need to help people move out of their cars. I agree. We need alternatives for folks. We need a public transit system that will move people around in ways that they need to move around. And we've done a good job of at least beginning to build some good infrastructure for pedestrians and bikes, but we've got a long way to go on that. And I get frustrated with waiting for how do we move people out of their cars. If we're just going to build this one parking structure, well, then what's next to transition out of so much reliance on cars? I want to see something concrete and bold I think we all share the goals of trying to address climate change, but it's operationalizing that, actually making it real. So I would like to see us repair their garage, spend $1.4 million, and then look at ways that we can, have a 5-year transition plan to really beef up our public transit. Spend some of that money that we were going to spend on a great big parking garage and figure out the financing to really invest in our public transit so we can actually make that transition instead of waiting for the next project when we'll have the same debate and then we'll build the parking and then we'll wait for the public transit infrastructure to help us all get out of our cars. And I'm afraid we're not going to get there unless we operationalize something. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi,
Oh, yes.
I'll just maybe be the last one, but my name is Carmela Senior Yule, and I'm a business owner in downtown in the Fountain Square Mall. So directly impacted by that 4th Street closure. I didn't plan to speak tonight, but I guess I was inspired by the discussion to just kind of share my experience in the day-to-day just for the 3 months that it's been closed. I hear every day from our customers and other employees in the area how hard it is to park downtown. We are all hearing that all the time. But I agree with what was just said, is like, this is the first meeting I've had a chance to attend on this topic, but I keep hearing repair or rebuild. And where is the discussion about maybe repair while we figure out what the rebuild is, have a design? That was a great point. How can you make an informed decision if you don't have that design? And then also, yeah, maybe we should look at a repair as part of that total cost, not just the initial bond if it was rebuilt plus the interest. And then when you're talking about those numbers, and what is another 1.4 million, what is that? It's a drop in the hat if you're looking at 30-some million altogether. But a repair would buy us that time, those 5 years, to come up with better plans, better structures. What would you do with that space if it wasn't a parking garage? I think that's a question that needs to be addressed and needs to be discussed. A lot of great points have been brought up tonight. But in the day-to-day, I think it might be smart to look at this as a bigger picture. And I think that's what I'm hearing from a lot of the people in this room. If we repair today, we have parking in 6 months again, which is good for the winter economy. Not everyone that comes downtown can bike in winter or walk. And it gives us 5 years to figure out what are the better solutions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ron Walker. I'm Vice President of Operations for CFC Properties, also chairperson for the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. And I've learned in the last 30 minutes, I guess I'm a representative for the middle-aged demographic. We're still here. And I want to first thank you again for the cooperation with the City of Bloomington when the garage was closed. I think due to their efforts and the communication, the transition to what I was referring to as interim parking has gone pretty smoothly, particularly for employers. I think they've adapted to this currently. It has gone less smoothly for retailers, and I'll focus on that for a minute. But before I do, I want to just also say thank you for revisiting this topic. That is not an easy thing to do for a council, I realize. It opens you up for more debate and more criticism, and we are all trying to make decisions with imperfect information, and that's typically even more true for public bodies. So thank you for considering this even further with new information that you have. We as CFC have felt much increased pressure for parking as a property manager for a number of reasons. Primarily that some of the folks who have permits in garages have difficulty moving around. They may have a physical disability, and so they've come to us saying, what can you do to help? And so we have a couple spaces that we have for our security officer, for our contractors, for our maintenance technicians. We're squeezing them in there. We had a tenant last week, one of our largest tenants fell and broke some bones in her foot. She's wearing a boot for a little while, so we have found a place for her to park. We're doing that where we can. We're kind of out of options now, and we've had to start patrolling more in lots that we own, which are really only a couple, because people are looking for a place to park for free. But the real concern I have is not with the employers in our building, it's with the retailers. They are feeling it in their sales, they're feeling it from their customers. It's just a challenge for people to park on the street because of the pressure that has increased there. And what's special about the retailers in downtown Bloomington is they're almost all local. All of ours are local businesses. They are entrepreneurs who are taking the risk to make it in what is a very tough business right now. And they have to specialize to be able to do that. And so we work closely with them because we really value that, because we want to keep it alive in downtown Bloomington. And so we're really concerned about that. We've talked with many of them. You'll hear about a petition a little later, I think. I've looked at who's on the petition. It's many of our tenants. And what's interesting about it is many of them are retailers. Some of them are large employers. One of them's a union. Many of them are counselors and psychologists who own and operate sole proprietorships in downtown Bloomington. And they are feeling it because their customers, their clients, are feeling the pressure. And that to me means if they can't operate in this way, if their clients can't, they won't continue to operate in downtown Bloomington. When we talk to our businesses, and many of them, not many, but some will say, I just want this problem to go away. We just need the garage back. And so they, I think at that point, they kind of want it to be over with as quickly as possible. When we tell them we'll be back in 5 years to tear it down, their feeling on this changes immediately. And so that's a very big concern. The downtown businesses need your support, and so we ask for it as well. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Council. Erin Predmore, President and CEO of the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for your willingness to look again at this issue with the new information that we had, that we received the new cost estimates, along with the current fund balances of the different options that you have available, the bond rating, and all the other issues that need to go into your consideration about funding this repair or replacement. The Chamber of Commerce is definitely in support of a replacement garage being built. You will have received this afternoon a petition from 178 individual organizations that have signed the petition requesting a rebuild of the 4th Street garage. They are not just our membership, so we spread it amongst anyone who is interested in looking at that. So I do want to make sure that you're aware of that constituency that is not here tonight, but does want you to know that they care very much about the rebuild for the garage. Since December, we have received at the Chamber information that 2 businesses that are currently located downtown are actively looking to leave after your vote not to rebuild the garage. They don't feel supported by the council and the city of Bloomington. They would like to grow and continue to provide jobs and income for all of our residents, pay taxes, and be part of that vibrant downtown that we speak of so highly, that we love. But they don't feel like that is where the future lies. So they are going to be looking outside our urban core to see what else is available for them. Those 2 businesses alone represent over 200 employees and $7.6 million in salaries annually, and that's a conservative estimate based on the low end of incomes in Bloomington. It also represents 32,000 square feet of empty space. So I don't think that's what we want our downtown to be, is empty. We want to avoid urban sprawl. We want to make sure that we have a compact, dense downtown where people can come and live and play all together without having all of the things spread out across Monroe County. We want to be able to appreciate our rural nature while also appreciating those city amenities that we love so much. I'm going to leave you this evening with a metaphor of inviting someone to your house to spend the weekend with you. Not building this garage is similar to inviting someone to your house, and then once they get there with their bags and everything ready to go to hang out and have fun with you, for you to say, I'm sorry, we don't have anywhere for you to sleep. You have to sleep outside. You have to go sleep in your car. You have to go do something else. But the hospitality isn't there for you to be able to spend that time and engage with that individual fully. So we need you to build a garage so that our businesses feel welcome, our visitors feel welcome, our residents feel welcome. The people going to the arts, the Waldron was one of the ones that signed our petition. Cardinal Stage is interested in this as well. Our restaurants, all of those things. They want you to be able to put that guest room up so they can get people to hang out with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council, for the opportunity to speak with you this evening and for reconsidering this issue. My name is Andrew Gunther, Chair of the Bloomington Environmental Commission and also a candidate for City Council in District 2. I've spent the last couple weeks walking around downtown and surrounding areas talking to local business owners about this particular issue and parking in general. Many business owners have reported up to 40% decreases in their business activity due to recent limits in parking supply. And uncertainty is the death of investment in our downtown. Rent costs downtown are high for both residential and commercial areas, and a lack of parking is an unsustainable economic policy for inviting investment for additional housing and additional commercial development. Betting on a large shift in our transportation options in Bloomington within 5 years is a foolhardy investment and will only seek to harm our economic footing and base. Sustainability measures in the garage, paired with accompanied planned urban density, can help offset carbon impacts of the garage, and I am supportive of all of these measures. Climate change is real and should be addressed. However, in District 2, for example, there are already limitations on parking that can accompany commercial development and business capacity. That has negative impacts on businesses' ability to turn over customers and produce revenue. I do not want to see downtown negatively impacted in the same way as these businesses in my district have been. When it gets hard to travel to economic hubs for people to shop or to attend work, many of them do not want to make that effort. They will simply move elsewhere, seek a job closer to their home, or they will go online to order things such as books, shoes, or even food from Amazon or other local delivery services. Our local businesses downtown need stable, sustainable parking. They need options available for customers to shop, for customers to peruse, and for customers to leave to go on to other commercial activities downtown and surrounding areas. I urge you all to reconsider your position, to support the parking garage being rebuilt, and help support local business downtown, not just big players who can afford rising costs downtown and elsewhere. Thank you.
I'm Mark Haggerty. I sense large market forces at work in this transaction. I'm always leery of bonds. I know how they get sold. I know how they're marketed. I'm always offended by the idea that we can't save money as a community and execute our projects without having to borrow a bond. And how that comes out to be mandatory to do a project like this seems to me to be undemocratic in the extreme. If art attracts people, I mean, should we really be involved in marketing the downtown? Is it lucrative enough that places can provide for their own parking, can get together their own fund and provide for the kind of clients that they're trying to attract, and that we don't have to provide that infrastructure? Like we're already providing for IU's downtown alcohol dorms, all their security, the sewage, the water, the electrical. Do we have to keep funding other people's projects? Do we have to fund businesses? Is that our responsibility as the public? I don't think so. I see this as an economic project, a project in economic development itself. And while art is supposed to attract people to Bloomington, we've thrown our music under the bus of capitalism and said, sink or swim. There's not even a place to play. We've lost Rhinos, we lost the Players Pub. Everything local about this town is dissolving in this frenzy of economic development that has put these high-rises in our downtown and forced gentrification further and further west, so that people that have grown up in my neighborhood couldn't possibly afford a house in our neighborhood. We've gone from 80% black to 80% white in my neighborhood. This is all a trend that hasn't been good for me and my native culture here, the culture of music, the culture of art, the culture of vision, poetry, literature, good things towards the future, some possible way to use this huge corporate institution to provide health care for our veterans in our jail, a vision of some sort. And we're losing that through these trends of economic development. Our south side of the square used to be where we could get a studio for $30 a month and have a bed and an amplifier and some books up there. And there were 100 of us, 150 or 200 of us up there. That's all being forced out. So think about that in your decision. Can we possibly provide a place for people to play? For God's sake. Anyway.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hello. My name is Adrienne Evans Fernandez. I am vice chair, possibly acting chair at the moment, of the City Parking Commission. I was holding off speaking because there were so many people who wanted to talk, and you've seen our report and our recommendations from the Parking Commission. I do want to remind that our Parking Commission is 9 people who have worked very hard at parking. We've looked at the parking needs of the downtown corridor from all possible angles. And I just want to remind, our recommendations back in December was that, given the state of the parking garage, the degradation that had happened over the years without follow-up and care, that we recommended that the garage be replaced. We have talked at length with residents of downtown, the people who own businesses. We have members who are business owners downtown. We have thought very carefully about what we think is good for downtown, what seems to reflect our values. We're very mindful of the issues of climate change. So I did just want to remind, our recommendation at the time was that we didn't see the value in spending money to repair a parking structure that we would most likely have to replace. The 4th Street garage is situated in a place that is very useful to many residents. It is used by a very diverse population of our citizens. It is people who work downtown, it's business owners, it's people who want to go to a show. So this is one of those garages that has there is a large need there, and if the idea of repairing it, say 5 years from now, would we even need that garage? It's difficult to say that in 5 years that particular garage would not be needed. So that is all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for public comment.
Is it possible to add? No, you're not.
No, I'm sorry. It's a one-shot deal here tonight. But we will be discussing this again next Wednesday, so please come back. All right. Going back to council members. First of all, are there any follow-up questions of staff? Okay. So I have a follow-up question, but I don't know if the staff person I need is here. But my follow-up question is about the cost of the debt service. So the bond you're requesting is $18,540,000. Does that include the cost of debt service, or how much is the cost of debt service?
I'll do my best to try to answer that. The controller is unavailable at the moment. My understanding is it is the current cost, and it does not include the repayment costs over the 20-year life of the bond. So that would be a different scheduled amount than the principal amount that we would be borrowing is the $18 million.
So do you have any estimate as to how much it will cost us for the debt service?
We would have an estimate based on that maximum of 6%. We'll try to get that from the controller here in a second and get your answer. We won't know until we sell the bonds really what that percent will be. It's unlikely to be that high, but we did estimate it based on the high amount, the maximum amount. So we'll get that for you.
Okay. Mr. Allen, did you have some figures for me?
Only to say that, kind of to reiterate, we can't provide specific figures on it.
Can you give your name and who you are?
My name's Larry Allen. I'm Assistant City Attorney. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chairwoman. The maximum number, again, as cited in the bond resolution, it can't exceed 6%. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to issue the bond. The current bond rates have fluctuated a little bit, somewhere between, I want to say, 3.5 and 4% over the last couple of months for a AA plus rated bond like we would be taking out with a 2021 year outlay.
So 6% a year, right?
No, the 6% is the maximum that we could possibly bond at. They are not 6% currently for a 21-year bond at a AA rating. That has fluctuated according to market forces. It depends when we sell the bond, as the Deputy Mayor noted. That has fluctuated in the past few months somewhere between 3.5 and 4%.
So the maximum is 6%, $1,112,000. 6% of the 18,540.
For the bond to even be issued, but to be very clear, the bond rating has not gone above 6% in somewhere, I want to say, maybe since the 1980s. So we don't anticipate
probably
that
lower.
being an amount.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we'll go to council member comments. Who would like to start? Councilmember Chopra.
So maybe some people picked this up earlier, but I'm super annoyed that we're here again. And part of it has to do with the reason we're here. We're here because the estimated price is approximately 25% more than we thought it would be. I don't think that's significant enough to change my mind. Well, it definitely isn't. And I don't think it's significant enough to be discussing this topic in the exact same way that we discussed before. It doesn't change the variables of the decision. Because, of course, if the 5-year repair plan is 25% more, then probably the 25-year repair, or the 10-year and the 15-year repair plan is going to cost 25% more, and so is the new garage itself. So it doesn't change the matter from the last time we spoke about this. I did want to highlight something that I found interesting on Instagram. Would it be a page or account or someone to follow? It's called Downtown B-Town Parking Probs. Downtown B-Town Parking Probs. Please follow it. This person is out taking photos of vacant parking spots at all times and all hours of the day in downtown Bloomington. And I know it's anecdotal, but it could be me. When I come downtown Bloomington, not so much during the workday anymore, admittedly, but up until October, was coming downtown at all days, all hours. I've never not come downtown because of parking, and I've never come down and thought, oh, gee, no spots, bye. It just doesn't happen. I come down for Cardinal stage productions on Saturday nights and find spots. I come downtown at 10 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays to have meetings. I have lunch on the weekdays. It is never, ever, ever a problem. And again, I know that I'm just speaking from my own experience, but I really think there's like a perception and reality problem here. So, is there a parking problem? Sure, if you have a problem with not getting the exact freaking parking space that you want, then I guess there's a problem. But if you're unwilling to walk, 1 or 2/10 of a mile, then there's not a problem. People in cities do it all the time. We call ourselves a city. Oh, no, don't call us a town. We're a city. Well, then let's act like one. I think that it is the smartest thing. I do think we need this parking garage. I think it's there. Let's keep it going. I'm happy to say, yes, let's spend the $1.4 million for the 5-year repair plan and reassess. And in 5 years, if we have new city council members up here who are not progressive whatsoever and they decide to say yes to a new parking garage, then so be it. But I'm not willing to do that. It's my understanding that next week on the agenda, the only item on it is this piece of legislation, or resolution rather, and I'm kind of debating whether or not I'll be here. I'm going to be a no vote, so it's sort of pointless, and I don't really hear hours and hours and hours have been spent on this topic. I'm really done with it. So I appreciate everyone coming out this evening. It's actually fewer people than I expected. I thought it was pretty cool that the chamber offered the free childcare. I think maybe it was just a little bit late announcement, but that's really awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you all for listening to what is probably one of my longer comments.
Thank you. Other council comment? Nobody else has comments? Councilmember Volin.
I'll take a crack at it. I want to agree with Councilor Chopra that we are here about $300,000. It was 1.1 million in December. It's 1.4 million now. I don't remember joining the majority of the Parking Commission in their vote. I think it was 7-0-1, and I passed on it, but I did vote for repair in December. And after hearing the presentation tonight and all the comments, I haven't heard a change. I did do some math. 352 spaces in the existing garage at $1.4 million for 5 years equals $795 per space. That's what it would cost to reopen the garage and get those spaces back. 527 spaces at $18.5 million for 50 years comes out to about $702 a space. There's not a dramatic difference in the value per space of repair versus replace. It's slightly more expensive. And part of the reason I voted for repair several months ago was because we know that there's a convention center coming. And even the most, I mean, I support the convention center. I've been open in my goal of seeing a civic center get built, and I expect there's going to be some parking there. My logic was reopen the garage as soon as possible, and between now and then we're going to have built. I mean, if my guess is correct, the first thing that'll get built will be the parking for the convention center, and we'll have a fallback while we replace the 4th Street garage, if that's what we're going to do. And that logic hasn't changed for me either. So, you know, I'm wondering, along with my colleague, Councilmember Chopra, why we're here again. Here's why we're here, is because it did not occur to me, it has never happened before in my 16 years on council, that I have wanted to have a roll call vote on whether to introduce a resolution, because resolutions don't get a first reading. They can be introduced in committee of the whole. And it did not occur to me, we have nothing in our procedure to, you know, I've never had to do it before, and there's nothing in our printed agenda that says, here's your opportunity to vote on whether or not we would even hear the resolution. I'm going to certainly be working to change that, because I would have voted against hearing this in the first place. There is no such a thing as a need for parking, there's a demand for it. The adequacy of parking supply depends on several variables. Depends on how you define adequate. Somebody described a business's need for sustainable parking. There's a funny oxymoron. Sustainable must mean economically sustainable for the businesses. I hope that every retailer in town, of which I used to be one, appreciates the fact that we have been subsidizing the parking that their customers have been using for at least 35 years. And finally, I've heard the term city used tonight. It's not the city until the council says so. The administration and the council together make up the city. I have to say this, and it's a harsh thing to say, but you know, there's a parallel to it. To say that we can't change overnight in the face of what many people have presented as climate change, other people have presented as sustainability of the city socially, is like saying that we can't talk about regulating guns after a mass murder. We can talk about it now. We must talk about it now. And I have to point out that the city of Kenosha in the year 2000 built themselves for about $9-point-something million a 2-mile-long streetcar line, electric wires overhead, rail in the street, okay? For $18 million, we could build a 2.5 to 3 mile streetcar line connecting every parking spot in downtown, going all the way to the sample gates. 10 years ago, when I floated this idea to the then architect of the university, he said he thought it was a fantastic idea if we would extend it from the sample gates to the corner of 7th and Woodlawn. You would be delighted to build an extension of the rail all the way up to the stadium, because he said everybody who is going to a game after the game wants to go one place, and that's downtown. That's a mind-blowing idea that I've been sitting on for 10 years because I thought that, that kind of thing usually only gets built with federal funds. And if you can get federal funds to build, any kind of transit, it's usually 80-20. They usually subsidize 80% of it or more. But we could build a streetcar line for the cost of this garage. Think about that for a minute. We could build a circulator to connect all the parking downtown, everything from 2nd and College to the Trades District and the Sample Gates in a big T right now. So meanwhile, I have here in front of me a copy of a page from a planning department land use study of downtown from the year 2002. And I want to read to you the top 7 uses of land in downtown Bloomington in 2002. Number 7 was university-related, 3.7% of land. Number 6 was government uses, 3.8% of land. Number 5 was restaurant/bar, 4% of land. Number 4 was residential. I was a resident of downtown back in the year 2000, 6.8% of land. Number 3 was office space, 9.6% of land. Number 2 was commercial space, 11.3% of land. The number 1 use of land downtown in 2002 was parking, 47.9%. Now, I defy anyone to tell me that we've built so much since 2002 that we've reduced parking to anything close to the second greatest use. Now, this is a year that predated Smallwood, so that might have counted as parking. All right, that was a big half a square city block that was turned into something that might otherwise have been used as parking. But 47.9% of land in the 118 acres of downtown considered by this study was devoted to parking. This is downtown. Imagine how much land is devoted to parking at College Mall or anywhere else in the city, if this is the densest part of the city. Okay. Now, I agree that with several things that my county counterpart, Mr. McKim, said. He I think, most eloquently summed up that there is a case for, vertical parking downtown. I'm not entirely against it. I changed my mind on the Trades District garage because it's better, according to the guru of parking himself, Donald Shoup. If you're going to have a dense development, don't make each individual building build their own parking concentrated in one place. And I voted on that because I expect that all the land in the Trades District will get built out. That's the only reason that I agreed to it. So I'm not entirely against the idea of building this, but we need more time to develop it. I absolutely detest the idea that the administration refuses to what they say, negotiate design with the council. It's not unreasonable to say, how many spaces are we going to build? What's the cost going to be? It's not unreasonable to ask that. I understand why they don't want to, because they want to be flexible in negotiating terms with people. But if the administration had made a more persuasive argument, an argument that wasn't, that didn't try to claim the mantle of sustainability when it's not a sustainability argument, I might have been persuaded. But I seriously doubt that Secretly Group, which has their office at 3rd and Rogers Street, has a need for parking at 4th and Walnut. I think that if you repair the garage now, it's open in 6 months, it solves the retail problem. By August, every retailer that benefited from those spaces will have it again. How much is a year of parking of 352 spaces worth to the retailers downtown? How much commerce is that going to be? I'm just very disappointed that this question has come up again. I would not have brought it back up again. I still believe that repair gives us the opportunity to make the plan that we all know we need, the parking plan, to finish the transportation plans that we can figure out what part parking plays in it. But just from a financial perspective, let alone sustainability or the environment, social or environmental sustainability, I just don't understand why we're here again. Thank you.
All right, further council member comment. Councilmember Rallo.
Well, I'd like to just pick up on where Councilmember Volman referred to, because I was looking at that 2002 study too, and that was surface parking lot occupied a great deal of that 47%. That's downtown land that's extremely valuable now. Why? Because we use it for business, we use it for residents. It's a very inefficient use of land to have surface parking lots downtown. And it makes for a very anti-pedestrian, built environment. I wanted to bring us back to I think the fundamental point that this is a replacement garage. We're not building a new garage, we're replacing a garage, and I think it's very clear that we can't do without the approximately 350 spaces that are there now. It's clear that the repair of the current garage, this garage, is more costly than anticipated. It's not just $300,000. It is continual inspection, and it is the quite clear probability that it will be closed again because needing more repairs. That cost is a cost externalized to businesses. Businesses need predictability. This garage is not going to offer that kind of predictability. This garage will be ambiguous in terms of whether it will be used or not, and whether it needs to be torn down next year or 5 years or sometime in between. It needs to be closed maybe indefinitely, who knows. So I think the most prudent way forward is to demolish and rebuild from a budgetary perspective. Putting millions of dollars into a structure that's going to be torn down in the fairly near term, to me, is a total waste of money. And I think that since we can't do without the garage, we need to rebuild it. Now, we're rebuilding it plus 200 spaces. Why is this needed? If you look at downtown Bloomington Incorporated census data, we've increased in downtown residents by about 15% per year. We have over 10,000 residents now living downtown. We've increased employees by 7% per year, per annum. We've increased businesses at about 5% per year. So we're increasing residents, businesses, and so forth much faster than we're increasing parking. That parking is going to be needed. I mean, I don't think, in terms of sustainability, and I've devoted most of my adult life to that, to not build the garage, I think will have the effect of pushing businesses out of downtown. So the comments were made, for instance, about expanding public transit. Absolutely, we need to invest in that. And in fact, federal government funds and state government is not fitting the bill in terms of the needs of Bloomington Transit. It seems that local government will have to step up. We need to do things like increase energy production, PV electricity, for instance. Yes, we need to expand biking, and we're on our way to platinum biking status. But we also need to attend to the built community. How will we occupy the land? If we do not accommodate businesses downtown, then what we'll see is them pushed to the perimeter of the city. So I think it was Lynn Coyne who raised a really excellent question at a previous meeting, and that is, why punish downtown businesses? A corollary is, why place downtown businesses at a competitive disadvantage to the periphery of the city, where sprawl is occurring? By not building this garage, we're going to induce sprawl. That is unsustainable, because they'll go outside to West 3rd Street and build, and have cheap land, relatively cheap land, and build large, extensive surface parking lots. So let me just spend another minute addressing sustainability features, which I think Mr. Rosenberger called greenwashing. I take exception to that. Park Smart certification which is administered by the Green Building Certification Institute, is the best we can do. And we took months negotiating with the administration for all of those features that were mentioned. That is coverage of solar PV cells in the garage, electrical vehicle charging stations, and accommodation for more, so conduits for that, bicycle parking, first floor commercial retail space. Those are all features that make it a much better structure and much more sustainable. And so they shouldn't be just brushed off as nothing. I think they're very important. No, they're not, actually. But if you have that ideological, that they can only be nothing, then you won't consider anything else. So the difficulty that most of us confronted back in December was the height consideration, because we had an indeterminate height. And the administration has worked with council and brought back a proposal that brings the height within a contextual, permissible height of adding a maximum of 35 feet to the existing structure height, which is 43, so 78 feet. I think that that fits well enough within our downtown as not to be excessive. Discussing climate change considerations, I think I'm absolutely aware of the threat of the IPCC warnings. I think, in fact, I think the first action on climate that the city took was at the council level back in 2005, which was to adopt a resolution in support of the Kyoto Protocol and reduction of greenhouse gases. So that was almost 15 years ago. I was involved in that. I was involved in the first greenhouse gas assessment and reduction plan. In the last 10 years, we've reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 13%. We've achieved other types of multimodal transportation. Those are all increasing, and we'll continue doing that. There are other ways to achieve carbon neutrality other than transportation. If you just look at transportation, yes, it's a huge thing to do, but we have other means to do that. Tightening building envelopes, various other conservation methods, alternative energy production, which I mentioned, sequestration, either through tree planting or root soil biomass. There are other ways in which we can address climate change. But I go back to the fundamental, which is that businesses have already said that if that predictability and the needed parking is not downtown, then they will go to the county. And so we will be responsible for the sprawl that then extends into the county. I would much rather avoid that and replace this garage, add additional parking that will be needed for the convention center, which is coming, which we've already agreed on as a council. And then work on everything else that's been mentioned tonight, because I think we're all in agreement that we need to increase every other effort that we can make for transportation other than car travel. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Any other council member comment? Councilmember Ruff.
When this came before us in combination with the Trades District Garage, I voted against a new garage in the Trades District. I forget what the overall vote on council was, but I voted against that garage. I had to simplify the argument as much as possible, and someone, I thought, from the public made a great argument, which was, this is supposed to be about the future economy, the future. And the future cannot be about driving in parking garages. And so I voted against it. This 4th Street garage it's much more complicated to me. It's been there decades. It's part of the existing infrastructure of the downtown. I was fine with repairing it, and with this new information, I'm still not sure now, after tonight's discussion, exactly where I am at repair versus versus rebuilding. There's a lot to think about. One thing I do want to say that, we hear a lot of those folks whose main arguments seem to be about the health of the downtown economically and downtown business. And they will also say, and we care about climate change too. We care just as much as anybody about the global environment. But the folks on the other side who are sort of primarily concerned about this as a policy reflection of how we're not changing and doing what we need to do with climate change if we rebuild and expand this garage and invest a lot of money into it. I don't often hear them saying at the same time then saying, yes, but we also care about downtown, the health of downtown businesses and downtown merchants and the downtown economy. But they clearly do. I think the argument really goes both ways, that those who are concerned about the future and about this as a climate change issue and climate change policy statement they can make the same claim that they care just as much about the downtown businesses as those who are primarily placing their argument on the economy of the downtown as also caring about climate change. I think they need to be seen as sort of opposite sides of the same coin. We all care tremendously about both of them. But I do just feel like, some folks are not really getting what the other side is saying. I mean, to me, and I think it was illustrated tonight, when someone says that people need to drive, they need this parking, and there'll be more need for it in the future, more and more need, and that's why we have to do this, suggests to me that they're not seeing that that's actually an illustration of the problem to the people who are concerned about the future and concerned about climate change. That statement is a great illustration of what the problem is, what's wrong, and why we cannot continue business as usual. We have to start doing things dramatically differently. Also, there was a comment made that people need to feel welcome in downtown Bloomington. People need to feel welcome when they come. That's true. That's important, right? But feeling welcome and how important that is versus, I know the other side is thinking, how does that argument stack up against famine, mass climate refugee migration, drought, fire, flood, war, disease, economic collapse? And I feel like that's not really being absorbed by people. That's the lens through which most of the younger folks here tonight that spoke are seeing this through. So this particular issue for this 4th Street garage, to me, it's very complicated. There's a lot of arguments on both sides. I'm not sure I really fully have my head around the sprawl argument. If not doing this and providing some additional parking will drive additional greenhouse gas emissions because it'll drive development farther out, which will force more overall. There's a lot I still have to think about on this, so I'm just going to have to pass tonight. That's not a cop-out. It's just, this is not a final vote. This is just a committee recommendation vote. And I just need to think about this more.
Thank you. Other council comment? Councilmember Sandberg.
What has changed and what has not changed? From my perspective, quite a bit has changed since the first time this came to us. And as far as my position hasn't changed because, of course, when we heard the first go-around, we heard many of the same arguments from the generations that are concerned about climate change and the really cataclysmic changes that are ahead of us that we need to be mindful of. We certainly do. As well as the stakeholders in the downtown who are certainly making the valid claims about the commercial vibrancy of the downtown and who this is going to impact. And so, again, my mind hasn't been changed because I was sold from the beginning that the replacement option was the wiser course with respect to being fiscally responsible. To me, a temporary 5-year, less than 5-year fix that now, this has significantly changed since the first time this came before us, there are extended costs. And it seems even less practical or pragmatic for me to just put a Band-Aid on something that clearly does need a more surgical repair. And so what's before us tonight, and this has not changed, is it's the approving the financing of the demolition and replacement of the 4th Street Garage. This is the financing piece. And a lot of people were here concerned about the design. That comes later. The design is later. What we are first and foremost talking about tonight is where are we going to get the funding to be able to do this? And is this a necessary investment in the economic health, the vibrancy of our downtown, and quite frankly, our city's economy, that we really could jeopardize if we're not smart here and making the right call and making the right investments. There's also been a lot of talk about, if each side's very passionate about where they're coming from. We hear gentrification, we hear capitalism gone amok. We hear, oh, you're going to hurt the visitors and all the people participating in the arts. One of the things that I do as a council person, and I do this all the time, I listen very carefully to who is here in chambers, but I'm also thinking about who is not here tonight. Who is this going to hurt that is not here to speak to us tonight? And I think about the commuters who need their jobs, who have to commute from Lawrence County and Owen County and other places to come here. And they are, because we are not a sophisticated city that has a sophisticated transit system. We're not London. We're not Chicago. We don't have buses. I lived in Chicago. I hopped on a bus and I was in the Loop in 10 minutes from the north side. We don't have that here. How are we going to get that? I agree, that's a good thing, but are we being pragmatic and realistic about where is the funding going to come from for us to have this sophisticated mass transit system that's going to help incentivize people to not use their vehicles? I would agree with everyone here tonight that speaks about the urgency of climate change. That's an important thing to do. But this is not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about an investment, a bond investment that's going to give us parking infrastructure that's going to keep our downtown viable, economically sound and viable. For the many working class people, this is social equity, which is every bit a piece of sustainability as it is the environmental concerns and the economic concerns. Is who are the working class people who do rely on their vehicles to get from where they live to the center of the downtown to have working opportunities. Other people who need to use the downtown for not just recreational use, but for business use, who come to the courthouse. We need to be mindful of the infrastructure that we have in the downtown. And as Councilmember Rallo said, this isn't a new brand spanking new thing. This is a replacement garage that is actually going to fill the gap of a need that we currently have in the here and now, which I do think is important. So I will be supporting the idea of replacement. I do think that is the fiscally responsible move. I thought so before, and now that the facts have changed, I think so in even more of a strong measure. A lot of passion here tonight, but there are a lot of people here too who we hear from who are not here tonight speaking passionately. I do want to commend Councilmember Jeff McKim. I believe his statements reflect a lot of what I feel. I felt he was very concise and very eloquent in his persuasive points about both factors that are here speaking their mind tonight about the environmental concerns as well as the economic development, and actually being a more sustainable option to keep your parking centralized and not have people having to drive all over the place in order to park. Thank you.
Any other council comment?
Comment?
We need to make sure everybody gets the first bite at the apple first. Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. Some of the things that we've heard from this panel up here is a very interesting and pertinent question. Why are we here tonight? And I think a lot of the mutual debate, the opposite sides of debate is a good reason why we are here tonight and why we're discussing this again. Another one of my colleagues would not have voted to even further this discussion, and I can truly respect that. I, however, would have voted to continue discussion this resolution. My position that I've held since last December will not change. There has been new information, and some of the beliefs that I held and many of the people that I discussed with, and particularly those in the business community, has not swayed me to change. I do listen. There is, to opposite sides. There is support, there's opposition. I've always advocated further collaboration because I think there's middle ground. I don't think there is a yes or no answer to all this. I think there's yes or no beliefs. I think there's yes and no facts. But I think from a community, I don't think that there is a yes or no answer to this. And I think further collaboration will be helpful. I think there can be a compromise. Again, there is not a clear-cut yes or no. There is middle ground that I think that can be explored and further discussed. And my position that I've held since the last discussion will not change, and I will support replacing the 4th Street garage. Thank you.
Councilmember Sturbaum.
Yes. Greenways, totally for them. Climate change, totally against it. But this isn't about that. What's interesting is we're council members and we think of our city as this little city with a circle around it, but we're really just a dot in a regional economy. And the regional economy, if you saw the map of where everybody was that came and participated in this economy, they're all over the place, all over the place. And that's just how it is. And we've needed this parking garage. We needed it when it was first built. It really brought the city back. I've seen the city when it was in disrepair and disarray. And, you know, these planners come to town and they say, you people don't know how lucky you are in this economy. You know, you're very fortunate. And I did not want to see a giant monster garage built. I saw pictures that scared the crap out of me. They were 96 feet tall and had triangles glued to it. You know, that's not what we want in the downtown. I'm still not convinced 78 feet is acceptable. But I do think we need to rebuild, and I was ready to go with a 70-foot height last time, and I'm going to pass tonight because I want to hear more about the height. The economics of waiting probably is not a good idea. So I'm going to pass, and I'm still thinking about the height and the compatibility of the structure. But the economy is bigger than we imagine it. Nobody's riding in from Greene County on a bicycle. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm the only one who hasn't taken a first bite at this apple, so I will go next. It's difficult to know where to start because there are so many things that I'd like to say. I really appreciate everybody who spoke tonight from the public. There were many eloquent comments, and a lot of very knowledgeable people spoke this evening. I'm going to just go down a list of things that I jotted down while other people were speaking, so I apologize if it's a little bit disjointed. I'll try to bring it back together at the end. First of all, we can have downtown restrooms and more covered bicycle parking without building a new parking garage, and I'm in favor of that. Secondly, today is not like the past. I appreciate what Mr. Coyne said, you know, and showing, I think, who was it from CFC who showed the images of downtown and dilapidated buildings, which Cook Incorporated invested in. This is a new era. Global climate change is an emergency. I disagree vehemently with my colleagues who said this is not about climate change. This is about climate change. This is about changing our behaviors in the light of threats to our continued existence on this planet. That is not an exaggeration. Read the IPCC report from last October. We need to reduce climate change, greenhouse gas emissions drastically, and get to zero emissions by 2050. Okay, next point. It is not inevitable that we will have to build a new garage. Everybody says, well, fiscally, let's not put a Band-Aid on it because in 5 years we'll have to tear it down and build a new one anyway. That's not a foregone conclusion. As a matter of fact, if I have anything to say about it, we're going to do aggressive transportation demand management, investment in transit, create better bike paths, have a downtown commuter shuttle for people from Greene County who are not going to bike in, and not need this in 5 years. Okay? So I don't buy that argument. Other people said we cannot lose 500 parking spaces downtown. We're not. There were 352 spaces in the current garage. I am not proposing to tear down that garage. I am proposing to repair that garage and give us at least 5 years of time to change our behaviors, which we must do because of climate change. You know, employers like to be downtown. There are available properties with a lot of parking that are sitting empty. I live right near the old RCA plant, which, you know, part of it is Catalent, part of it is the Social Security office, but a vast portion of that area is vacant. So let's put a park and ride there, have the shuttle go by there, you know, every 15 minutes, take people downtown. There are other places down in the city, not sprawl, that is infill. There are other places where we can either do a circulator bus or where people who businesses who absolutely insist upon having cars could set up shop. This repair option will get that garage back online by August. I understand that businesses are struggling right now, and tourists, you know, summer is a hot time for tourists. It's going to be tough. But it'll be tough for a whole hell of a lot longer if we tear it down and build a new garage. Somebody said, you know, they were talking to businesses downtown and they just want this problem to go away. Climate change is not going away, people, and this is about climate change. This is, you know, we can bury our head in the sand, but then our grandchildren aren't going to have anything to inherit from us. If we don't give a shit about future generations, go ahead. Don't change anything. Business as usual. But if you do care about future generations, please, we need to change our actions now. And I apologize if that sounds like a personal affront to anybody here or out there. I know everybody cares about their grandchildren. I'm not saying you don't. But I'm saying, you know, we really have to prioritize reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We've got to. I would really like to know, and I will talk with Ms. Predmore later, how the petition was presented to the businesses, unions, and individuals who signed the petition that the Chamber presented to us. Was it presented as, do you want downtown parking or do you not want downtown parking? Or was it presented as, do you want a new garage in 2 years and nothing in between? Or do you want the same garage we already have repaired, open in 6 months? I would just like to know, because that's a big difference. Addressing the two businesses that are looking at leaving the downtown. That's very unfortunate. I think it's very valuable to have employees downtown. It supports the downtown businesses. It contributes to the vibrancy downtown. Please, who are these businesses? Come and talk to us. Come and talk to me. I will meet with you. Let's try to figure out a solution. I think that, you know, having the current parking garage repaired in 6 months, that could really help you out much quicker. So let's talk. I really don't like this, oh, these two businesses, I can't say who, but two businesses. Come on out, let's talk. Let's figure out a solution. So I think we need to fast track the transportation demand management. For those of you who don't know what that is, educator up here, it's, you know, finding those people who could possibly not take a car and making it easier for them to do that. to not take a car. It's not saying, you who have a bad hip, we're taking your car away, you have to take the bus and walk to the bus every day. That's not what it is. It is saying, hey, you're 40 years old, you're in good shape. This bike path here is a little dangerous. Let's fix that up. Let's make that an attractive bike path and safe for you so you can come ride your bike. So let's do that transportation demand management before we invest $18.5 million in a new parking garage. It just makes sense. There is money available to fix this garage without going into debt. There's over $1.6 million in reversions. I don't know which of it is from which fund. You know, maybe there's only $1 million that's available right away. We have other sources. Going into debt, that's a serious commitment. That's committing funds that are then not available for other things. TIF funds can be used to buy buses. That's a better way to do it, or a streetcar. That is a much better investment for the benefit of more people for a longer term than a parking garage. Everybody says people need parking, people need parking. The human race needs a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. That's it, period, end of sentence. Councilmember Ruff, did you have another comment?
This is not necessarily an encouraging note, but it helps put things in perspective. And I don't think we should forget about what Interstate 69 represents. Mr. Bingham, I believe, put up some numbers earlier with the point of illustrating how tremendously, almost absurdly expensive it would be to make some of these transitions. The cost of solarizing, the cost of making the changes, the cost of transitioning to a truly sustainable system. And one of the figures he put up was a $1.2 billion, I think, $1.3 billion. I forget what that referred to exactly. And it seems staggering. But when we stop and think that we have already spent between $3 and $5 billion on this I-69 project, and by the time it's said and done, it will be $5 to $10 billion for simply an expanded superhighway at the opportunity cost, of making this transition that we have to make. And those funds have been squandered, and it makes me physically ill to think about that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any other second bites at the apple, Councilmember Chopra?
Heck yeah. I heard some crazy crap up here I'd like to comment on. I'm not up for re-election, so I'm going to get it straight. So two things. First of all, I heard a comment by Councilmember Sandberg imploring about where we're going to get the money for better transport, and yet she's in favor of an $18 million garage. I mean, that's where you get the money, right? Like, you just use the money for something else. So it seems super obvious. I got a lot of people who text message me the same thing as soon as I thought it. And I want to say that the politically easy thing to do is to vote yes in this situation. And I think that most of my council members would agree that that's the easy thing to do, is vote yes. Because sometimes you have to make hard decisions and make the unpopular ones and make the decisions that you said that you would make when you were running for office. And I honestly think that this is up for another vote closer to the election for a reason. And I hope that my council colleagues can remember all the things that they talked about when they ran for office and claim that they want to do the right thing, and they just have some guts and vote no.
Any other second comments? Councilmember Rollo.
Just for clarity, a downtown shuttle or bike trails or other measures to have multimodal transportation. This isn't mutually exclusive. I mean, we're talking about replacing a garage. It doesn't mean that we're going to give up everything that we've been doing related to sustainability. And in fact, again, I would argue that if you're going to lose businesses that are going to employ hundreds of people and move out to the county, you're inducing sprawl, which is absolutely opposed to a sustainable model. That's why we have compact urban form. That's why the downtown is successful, because that's what we've been doing over the years, and it's worked. I mean, we have a success story that most cities envy. And so it's amazing to me that it's coming down to this idea that either you're you have wanton disregard for the climate if you vote for this garage, or you're very green if you don't. I think that it's a very confused issue, I think, and anyway. But we brought it back because, not because of political considerations, actually. We brought it back because the administration and leadership of the council have been talking about the major problem, which was the height, and that we could resolve the height. Because what was found in the engineering studies was that the convertibility of the floors was really, it was unadvisable, because we wouldn't use the convertibility. If we didn't use it right away, it would be useless. And that brought down the height considerably. That's why this is back. It's also back because, of course, you know, the downtown businesses are concerned about it. And this is important, absolutely, for the community. So I think it was justified. And it was the consensus of the majority of the council that we should bring it back. It wasn't just my decision. But lastly, I wanted to say that some things, we were talking about the design of this, and Susan Sandberg put it right, that, you know, it's premature to talk about the design. We have a lot of elements that we've negotiated, but the administration has said we can have 2 appointments on the design committee. So we'll move ahead with inclusion of the council in the design. That's it. Thanks.
Councilmember Volin.
3 quick things. One, there were enough votes to pass this in December if the administration had just agreed to a 70-foot limit. I don't know why they didn't. Number 2, the final vote on this was 0-7-2. No one on this dais voted for this proposal in December. Finally, I'll leave you all with some homework. Let's assume a 2.5-mile minimum length of a downtown circulator. Lou May will tell you that it costs $70 an hour to run a bus. The average bus runs 10 miles an hour. The meters run from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. To fund a bus that would run every 15 minutes in both directions, 2 buses on a circuit, 13 hours a day, every day of the year, would cost $665,000 a year. Now, we subsidize the garages right now with TIF funds to the tune of $600,000. Granted, that money can't be used to operate a bus. We would have to get that revenue from parking. But we can get that revenue from parking fees. We just have to decide that we want to do it. You can experiment with those figures, but just remember, $70 an hour to run a bus. The average bus can run about 10 miles an hour with stops and everything included. You do the math and decide. Take a look at downtown, see where you'd like the bus to go, the circulator to go, and then let's make it happen. Thank you.
Any other final comments? Well, I will just say a couple things. We are not encouraging sprawl if we have a shuttle bus from the RCA site or somewhere else to downtown every 15 minutes, as Councilmember Volin said. And my major problem last December was not height. So it doesn't matter to me how high it is or how low it is or whatever. Okay, so
Second.
We've had, now this tonight is just a straw poll. It's just a straw poll. Next Wednesday, we're going to do it all again. and have the actual vote. So just so you all know. All right, let's start on my left. Councilmember Sandberg.
There is nothing easy or politically expedient about my yes vote.
And I'm passing.
Yes.
Pass.
No.
Yes.
No.
3 pass, 2 no, 4, 3 yes, 3-3-2.
3-3-2 was the vote on the straw poll. And that it concludes our business for this evening. Thank you all for being here. We will discuss this issue again next Wednesday, starting at 6:30 at a regular session of council.